Chapter 2982. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The dazzling golden sword light that covered the sky fell from the sky like a rain of arrows. At least 50 blood sword sect disciples were enveloped by the dazzling golden sword light. These people were immediately filled with horror. Their faces turned pale as they scattered in all directions in fear. Even the 40 or so nearby disciples that weren't enveloped by the sword lights subconsciously retreated. Bam! 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 Of the 50 or so blood sword sect disciples, there were a few lucky ones who managed to escape the range of the sword light and keep their life. However, the remaining 50 disciples were all killed by the sword light. Blood and flesh splattered as sword lights flashed. After the dust and the rain of blood dispersed, a deep pit could be seen on the ground. Many bones, weapons, and armor fragments were scattered in the pit. There were also some fragments of godheads. The 50 disciples that were lucky enough to survive were all intimidated by Ji Tianqing's might and were both furious and terrified. They didn't dare to gather together, so they scattered and pointed at Ji Tianqing, left emissary Jin, and the others as they cursed. "You bastards who deserve to die by 1,000 cuts, you will all die a horrible death. Even if we are killed today, we will never submit. We were born as members of the Blood Sword sect, and we will die as ghosts of the Blood Sword sect. We will never be defeated. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, the sect master will definitely avenge us. It won't be long before the sect master cuts you to pieces and returns today's hatred tenfold." These disciples knew that they would definitely die today. Not to mention the many divine lords and disciples of the Bloodblade sect, just Ji Tianqing alone could easily kill them all. All they could do was straighten their backs and straighten their chests. Even if they were killed on the spot, they would die with dignity and not tarnish the reputation of the Blood Sword sect. Of course, if possible, they would also like to stall for time. At the same time, Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin waved their hands and gave the order to attack. "What are you waiting for? Open fire. The sect master of the Blood Sword sect isn't here. Let's use this opportunity to destroy the Blood Sword sect. Destroy their sacred mountain and the dragon blood forbidden land." The three of them roared furiously. The 18 divine warships obeyed the order and blasted out divine cannons and fiery light pillars that blotted out the sky. Boom, boom, boom. At least 500 beams of dazzling multicolored divine light and dark red flames streaked across the sky and blasted towards the mountain peak. The mountain peaks within a radius of dozens of miles were covered by the divine cannons. If this batch of divine cannons were to land, the mountain peak would be torn apart. Many palaces and buildings would also be razed to the ground. As for the 50 disciples and 100 blood-armored guards, there was no way they would be spared either. He would definitely be crushed to pieces and turned into ashes. The cannons and divine light that blotted out the sky had already enveloped the peak of the mountain. In the next moment, the mountain peak would be razed to the ground. At this critical moment, the sound of a sword piercing through gold and splitting stone suddenly erupted from the Blood Kenshin Hall in the middle of the mountain peak. Clang! The crisp but unpleasant sword chime seemed to tear the sky and space apart. In the blink of an eye, a huge blood-red sword that was thousands of feet tall flew out of the temple and into the sky. Hum! The blood-red sword radiated a boundless bloody light that instantly enveloped the entire mountain. The dozens of palaces and buildings on the mountain peak, the 50 disciples, and the 100 guards were all enveloped by the bloody light. The bloody light was like a canopy or an inverted bowl that protected the mountain peak. Boom, 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 boom. More than 500 cannons and light pillars viciously blasted the bloody canopy, creating thunderous booms that shook the heavens. Countless people were dizzy from the loud booms. The weaker disciples were even shaken to the point of bleeding from their ears. The entire mountain shook violently, and countless rocks and stones collapsed halfway up the mountain. The light pillars and cannons that filled the sky all collapsed, splashing out fragments of divine light that blotted out the sky. The bloody canopy, however, was undamaged. It only trembled a few dozen times before calming down. On the mountain peak plaza, many guards and disciples looked up at the bloody canopy with incredulous expressions. After a moment of daze, they came back to their senses and cheered excitedly. "We're not dead. We're saved. Ha ha ha, the sacred sword saved us. It must be the sect master. The sect master is back." After 1,000 years, the sacred sword has finally appeared. The mighty sect master. The disciples and guards of the blood sword sect all knew that the sacred mountain contained a bloody sacred sword, the #1 divine artifact of the sect. Ever since the blood sword sect had been established, it had never encountered a calamity or great calamity. Thus, the mysterious bloody sword had never appeared before. In their words, the blood sword sect had yet to encounter a powerful enemy worthy of using the sacred sword. But today, at the moment of life and death for the blood sword sect, the mysterious bloody sword had finally appeared. How could the disciples and guards of the blood sword sect not be wild with joy? The bloody canopy was still there, and the 1,000 tall blood-red sword floated at the top of the canopy, flickering with a blazing bloody light. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and all the members of the Bloodblade sect looked up at the bloody sword with complicated expressions. Ji Tianxing's eyes were sharp as he carefully observed the sword. He really wanted to know what was so special about the bloody sword that God Monarch Blood Illusion was so afraid of. On the other hand, God Monarch Blood Illusion, left emissary Jin, and the others revealed deep fear and anxiety. After all, it was a supreme monarch-level divine artifact. If the bloody sword continued to protect the sacred mountain, even if the 18 divine ships used all their strength, they might not be able to break through the defense of the bloody sword. The battlefield suddenly calmed down. The members of the blood sword sect rejoiced, but the atmosphere of the Bloodblade sect was very solemn. At this moment, the 1,000 tall blood-red sword suddenly flashed with a purple light. Whoosh! A black-robed figure more than 3 tall stepped out of the bloody sword. He stood in the sky, exuding a powerful divine might and domineering aura. He stood in the sky and appeared before everyone. The gazes of countless people fell on him in unison. It was a handsome God clan member dressed in black robes. His face was handsome and demonic, and his skin was as white as jade, devoid of blood. He had a pair of elf-like pointy ears and a dark red mark of a bloody sword on his forehead. His purple eyes were emotionless as he indifferently scanned the crowd. In the end, his gaze fell on Ji Tianxing, Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, you really came. However, that demoness Lin Shui didn't come. How dare trash like you charge into the dragon blood forbidden ground? The black-robed god race member said indifferently. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly spread throughout the area and entered everyone's mind. There was no anger in his tone, but it contained frightening confidence and domineering power. Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin all had solemn expressions as they hurriedly sent messages to Ji Tianxing. It's the sect master of the blood sword sect. He's Lin Shan. It looks like his strength has improved again. He's not far from the 8th level of the Divine Lord Realm. Chapter 2983. Actually, there was no need for left emissary Jin and the other two to remind him. Ji Tianxing could also guess that the black-robed Divine Lord was the master of the blood sword sect, Lin Shan. After all, this person had walked out of the blood sword and had the powerful aura of a high divine lord. The disciples and guards of the blood sword sect all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the master of the blood sword sect. As for the 10-odd divine lords and hundreds of experts of the Bloodblade sect, they all felt a great pressure. Everyone gripped their weapons tightly as they stared at the master of the blood sword sect solemnly. Divine Lord Blood Illusion stepped forward and said in a deep voice, Lin Shan, after 300 years we meet again. Even though your strength has improved, it's useless. You're the only one left in the dragon blood forbidden land. No matter how strong you are, you can't defeat so many divine lords and experts. Even if the master doesn't come, we can easily kill you. Stop resisting stubbornly, just admit defeat and surrender. With Divine Lord Blood Illusion's reminder, the people of the Bloodblade sect felt much more at ease and regained their confidence. They were just intimidated by the name of the master of the Blood Sword sect and instinctively felt uneasy and fearful. But it was different now. The Bloodblade sect had the advantage in numbers, while the master of the Bloodsword sect was alone. No matter how strong he was, he could not withstand the attacks of so many experts. He would definitely die, so what was there to be afraid of? The master of the Blood Sword sect stared at Divine Lord Blood Illusion as a disdainful sneer appeared on his lips. Blood Illusion, have you forgotten the pain of that sword strike 1,000 years ago? Every time we meet, I have to remind you that it was that sword strike that caused you to lose your divine body forever. You will never be able to recover. Divine Lord Blood Illusion's most painful and infuriating memories were evoked. He roared in a deep voice, Lin Shan. You despicable and shameless bastard. You won't be happy for long. Soon, you will die under my sword. At that time, I'll definitely burn your bones and scatter your ashes, and make you suffer all kinds of pain and torment. Ha 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 ha. The master of the Blood Sword sect raised his head and laughed. He said in a disdainful tone, I said that only that which Lin Shui is qualified to fight with me. No matter how many of you there are, you're still a bunch of trash. You're only fit to be nourishment for my sword. As he spoke, he manipulated the blood-red greatsword and released an overwhelming slaughter sword intent. Buzz. A layer of blood-red killing intent visible to the naked eye spread out like ripples, covering a radius of several hundred miles. Many of the Sir-Gods and experts of the Bloodblade sect were swept by the blood-red killing intent. Immediately, their bodies shook violently as they revealed intense fear. That terrifying killing intent caused the illusion of hell to appear in everyone's minds. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and their bodies were cold. For a moment, the fighting spirit of the Bloodblade sect's members was extinguished, and their fear of the sect master of the Blood Sword sect grew. The Blood Sword sect master became even more pleased with himself when he saw this. He sneered in disdain, ha ha ha. An ant will always be an ant. Everyone was speechless. Only Ji Tianxing remained calm and indifferent from the beginning to the end. Even the terrifying killing intent released by the Blood Sword did not affect him at all. Seeing that the Blood Sword sect master's aura had suppressed everyone else, he took a step forward and said with an indifferent expression, Lin Shan, your performance ends here. The more you bluff, the more it proves that you have a guilty conscience. The moment he said this, countless gazes gathered on him. The Blood Sword sect master also frowned as he stared coldly at Ji Tianxing. Brat, you are Tianxing? Although he had never seen Ji Tianxing before, he was Ji Tianxing's archenemy. However, Ji Tianxing was a mortal enemy of the Blood Sword sect. He had seen Ji Tianxing's portrait long ago, so he could recognize him. You're just a coward who doesn't even dare to go to the desolate mountain range. What right do you have to slander me? The Blood Sword sect master sneered, his face filled with disdain. Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, I didn't go to the desolate mountain range because I already knew everything and predicted that you would stay behind in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. Thus, I directly charged into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and took your head. As for those small fries in the desolate mountain range, I'll catch them all in one fell swoop after killing you. The Blood Sword sect master was stunned for a moment before he burst into wild laughter. Ha ha ha, no matter how you quibble, you can't hide the fact that you're a coward. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with pity, Lin Shan, you're the Blood Sword sect master. How could you fall to the point of pretending to be crazy? I saw through your tricks and am already in front of you, about to take your dog life. Yet you're still stubborn and say that I'm a coward. What kind of logic is that? The Blood Sword Sect Master was speechless, and could only frown and stare at him with a malicious gaze. Ji Tianxing continued, "In front of me, don't use your little tricks to embarrass yourself. In fact, you don't have any confidence at all. The only reason you're spouting nonsense is to stall for time. You're waiting for your subordinates to return to the Dragonblood Forbidden Land to help you. However, they're all blocking me in the desolate mountain range and won't be able to return in a few days. Moreover, they can't build a teleportation array in the desolate mountain range. Firstly, the price is too great. Secondly, it would take too much time. If I'm not wrong, they must have a divine artifact. A divine artifact that contains the laws of space and can travel through space." The people from the Bloodblade sect nodded when they heard Ji Tianxing's words. They felt like they had come to a sudden realization. However, the Blood Sword Sect Master's expression changed subtly. A hint of shock flashed through his eyes, and he found it hard to believe. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, then continued, "The spatial divine artifact that your subordinates can control is at most high monarch grade. If you can fit all the divine lords and experts and bring more than 4,000 people through space, you'll need to spend a lot of resources and time. Let me guess, the distance between the desolate mountain range and the Dragonblood Forbidden Land is more than 10 million kilometers. That divine artifact might need to travel 3 times and spend several billion divine stones to return to the Dragonblood Forbidden Land. Even if they receive your orders and rush back as quickly as possible, they'll still need 2 hours. What you need to do is to put on a show and stall for 2 hours. Once all your lackeys return, you'll have a chance to turn the tables. This monarch guessed correctly, right?" After saying this, Ji Tianxing smirked at the Blood Sword Sect Master and said, "Unfortunately, you won't be able to wait for them to come back. In 2 hours, you'll be dead, and the Dragonblood Forbidden Land will be reduced to ruins." The disciples and guards of the Blood Sword Sect were all dumbfounded and looked at each other. As for the divine lords and disciples of the Blood Sword Sect, they all breathed a sigh of relief, as if a great burden had been lifted from their shoulders. There was a burst of discussion in the crowd. No wonder the people of the Blood Sword Sect all ran to the desolate mountain range, leaving only the Blood Sword Sect Master to guard the sect. No wonder the Blood Sword Sect dared to do this. They have a spatial divine artifact that allows them to quickly come back. How did young Master Tianxing know a secret that even our sect doesn't know? If this is all young Master Tianxing's speculation, doesn't that mean he can predict the future? Just how terrifying is his intelligence and strategy? No wonder young Master Tianxing insisted on attacking the Dragonblood Forbidden Land. He saw through everything long ago. The divine lords and disciples of the Blood Sword Sect felt even more reverence and admiration for Ji Tianxing. They suddenly felt that with young Master Tianxing's help, the Blood Sword Sect was nothing to fear. Ever since the start of the war, the Blood Sword Sect had never been defeated. This was the best proof. Moreover, their fear of the Blood Sword Sect Master lessened, and the shadow in their hearts dissipated. The fighting spirit that had previously dissipated was ignited once more. Chapter 2984. The Blood Sword Sect Master's plan had been exposed, and his heart was in turmoil. He stared at Ji Tianxing in disbelief, his eyes almost spitting fire. He had never thought that Ji Tianxing would guess his thoughts and plan. Even the spatial artifact and the time the experts of the Blood Sword Sect would return was completely correct. It was as if Ji Tianxing could read his mind and read his thoughts and memories. At this moment, the Blood Sword Sect Master was even more wary of Ji Tianxing. He even felt a trace of fear in his heart. Almost demonic in intelligence. These words suddenly appeared in the Blood Sword Sect Master's mind. This was his evaluation of Ji Tianxing. However, even if he had been exposed in front of everyone, he couldn't show his fear. After calming himself down, he still laughed contemptuously. "Ha ha! You little bastard, you're quite good at deceiving people. Your story is quite convincing. However, even if you have a glib tongue, it's useless. Today's battle still depends on strength. Ji Tianxing didn't waste any more time. He sneered. That's right. There's no point in talking. Let's fight. After saying this, he sent a message to Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin. Leave the Blood Sword Sect Master to me. Protect me and let them surround and kill the remaining members of the Blood Sword Sect. Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin hurriedly nodded and followed him to the peak of the sacred mountain. At the same time, left emissary Jin gave orders to the 18 God Lords. The 18 God Lords personally piloted the battleships and fired at the blood-colored light barrier. This great battle with a great disparity in numbers had finally begun. Boom, boom, boom. Hundreds of cannon fire and light pillars rained down on the blood-colored light barrier like a storm. Xue Huan, left emissary Jin, and left emissary Jin also used their ultimate skills to slash at the blood-colored light barrier. Ji Tianxing even took out the Burial of Heaven and used his trump card, turning into a 1,000-foot-tall golden-armored war god. Heaven's Splitting Sword. He unleashed all of his power, holding the 800-meter-long Burial of Heaven sword with both hands, and slashed at the blood-red sky with all his might. Sensing his powerful divine might, the Blood Sword Sect Master's expression changed. He hurriedly used a secret technique to activate the Blood Sword's power. Buzz! The crimson sky began to tremble, and the crimson light became even denser. Its defensive power also doubled. The fear and unease in the hearts of the disciples and guards of the Blood Sword Sect gradually disappeared. Under the lead of a few elite disciples, they all rushed to the main hall not far away to activate various divine arrays. They wanted to use the formation to help the sect master of the Blood Sword Sect block the attacks of the Bloodblade Sect. Boom! An earth-shattering boom suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth. The giant sword of Burial of Heaven, which was 8,000 feet long, slashed into the blood-colored sky, sending shards of blood-colored light flying everywhere. The 5-colored giant sword collapsed, and countless fragments of divine light splattered everywhere. But a 10,000-foot-long crack was slashed open in the blood-red skies. Strength crazily leaked out. The blood-colored giant sword hovering in the sky crazily trembled and actually let out a sorrowful cry. The Blood Sword Sect Master's mind was connected to the Blood Sword. The Blood Sword had been damaged, and he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. He let out a pained grunt. However, he felt even more shock and disbelief in his heart. Damn it! Where did that little bastard's sword come from? How could it damage this Lord's blood sword? The blood sword had always been the life-bound divine artifact that he was most proud of. The way he saw it, the blood sword was a peak-quality divine artifact. After being refined by the blood-exchanging technique for 1,000 years, he had become one with the blood sword. This allowed the blood sword's quality and power to reach a whole new level. It was very close to a king-grade divine artifact. Unless a true king-grade divine artifact attacked, no divine artifact could shake his blood sword. But now, his pride had been shattered. The Blood Sword Sect Master suppressed his shock and formed hand seals with both hands, fully activating the power of the blood sword. The crack in the crimson sky was quickly repaired. However, the 18 battleships and the 3 Sir God experts continued their relentless attack. Ji Tianxing held the Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed down with all his strength. Heavenly Dragon World Slash! Ji Tianxing roared as golden light surged out of his body. The Burial of Heaven also released a dazzling golden light, forming a 1,000-foot-long golden dragon that slashed at the sky. Boom! Crack! Another deafening explosion occurred at the peak of the holy mountain. A 10-mile-long gap was created in the blood-red sky, and shards of debris flew everywhere. The entire holy mountain shook violently, and several ravines appeared on the mountain. Countless rocks collapsed. Violent shock waves swept up the dark red shards, creating a bloody flood in the sky. PFFF. The blood sword sect master was also injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. The giant blood sword trembled, and a bloody light flashed crazily. Damn it! The blood sword sect master cursed angrily. He didn't care about healing his injuries and entered the blood sword without hesitation. Whoosh! With a flash of purple light, he fused with the giant blood sword. He used all his strength to use his ultimate skill, vowing to maintain the bloody sky and protect the blood sword sect. No matter what, I have to hold on for 2 hours until reinforcements return. At that time, I will kill everyone in the Bloodblade sect, not leaving even a chicken or a dog alive. Especially Tianxing. I'm going to extract his divine soul and torture him for 1,000 years. Only then will I be appeased. The blood sword sect master roared in his heart as he activated the power of the blood sword. Soon, Ji Tianxing slashed out a third time with all his strength. Sword piercing 9 heavens. He bellowed in a loud voice. Holding the Heaven Barrier sword with both hands, he fiercely thrust out his strongest sword. A dazzling golden sword light cut through the sky like a blazing sun and landed on the mountain peak, slashing at the bloody sky. The hole in the bloody sky didn't have time to heal in the first place. After being slashed by the divine golden sword, it could no longer hold on. Boom! Crack! Following a loud explosion that shook the universe, the gap was instantly torn apart. The hole extended to both ends and actually expanded tenfold, reaching a length of 10,000 feet. Moreover, countless cracks appeared around the hole, scattering countless fragments of bloody light. After a few breaths, a hole with a radius of 15 miles appeared. The bloody sky could no longer hold on after suffering such a heavy blow and soon fell apart. The blood sword wailed fiercely, flickering with bloody light. The blood sword sect master was also heavily injured, his divine power greatly reduced. No. How can I lose to him? The blood sword sect master cried in his heart, filled with grief and indignation. But it was too late. Ji Tianxing, Left Emissary Jean, and Godlord Blood Illusion were the first to pass through the huge hole and reach the peak of the holy mountain. The 4 experts began a massacre, using earth-shattering divine abilities to cover the buildings on the mountain peak. Rumble! With a deafening explosion, the wide square and more than 20 magnificent palaces were blasted into ruins. Even the 50 disciples and more than 100 guards who had just fled the ruins in panic were killed by Ji Tianxing in 3 slashes. The 18 godlords controlled the divine battleships to unleash a barrage of cannon fire and light beams that rained down on the mountain peak. As a result, the entire mountain peak became a scene of desolation and chaos. Chapter 2985. In just 100 breaths, the Saint Mountain was blasted into pieces. The palaces and buildings on the mountain peak were all destroyed. The Saint Mountain, which was originally 1,000 feet tall, was now a 3,000 feet tall ruin. Many of the treasuries of the Blood Sword sect, as well as the secret passages and rooms inside the mountain, were also destroyed. The loss of the Blood Sword sect was immeasurable. It would be difficult for them to recover in 50 years. However, the earth-shattering battle was not over yet. The sky within a few hundred miles was still filled with smoke and dust. 18 divine lords surrounded the ruins of the Saint Mountain in their battleships and continued to bombard it. The goal of the Bloodblade sect was not as simple as destroying the Saint Mountain. They also wanted to raze the Saint Mountain to the ground and not leave a single intact stone for the Blood Sword sect. In the sky above the ruins, Ji Tianxing, Xue Huan, Xue Long and Left Emissary Jean were attacking the Blood Sword with all their might. The Blood Sword sect master had fused with the Blood Sword. It looked like a giant blood sword that was 1,000 feet tall. Showing off his ability, the bloody light soared to the heavens. The Blood Sword was extremely ghostly and nimble. It flashed and shuttled in the sky. Only Ji Tianxing could catch the trajectory of the Blood Sword and block its attack. Xue Huan, Xue Long and Left Emissary Jean could not defend against it. In the last moment, the blood sword had brushed past Divine Lord Xuehuan and sent him flying. The next moment, the blood sword appeared behind Left Emissary Jean. Left Emissary Jean was shocked. He subconsciously teleported and dodged the blood sword's attack. However, 2 of the hundreds of dark red sword chi released by the blood sword hit him and made 2 bloody holes in his right leg. Left Emissary Jean groaned in pain. Seeing this, Divine Lord Xuelong immediately teleported over to help him block the blood sword's attack. However, the blood sword crossed 50 miles and appeared above Divine Lord Xuelong's head and slashed down. Divine Lord Xuelong did not have time to dodge and was about to be cut in half. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing teleported over and blocked the blood sword's attack. In just 30 breaths, the 2 sides had exchanged more than 200 blows. Xuehuan, Xuelong, and Left Emissary Jean were all wounded by the blood sword. Their god power was drained rapidly, and their fighting abilities were weakening rapidly. The blood sword, on the other hand, was galloping freely between heaven and earth, flashing back and forth. The divine ability killer moves of the 3 divine lords could not harm the blood sword at all. Only Ji Tianxing was able to threaten the blood sword, injuring it 3 times and weakening its power a bit. However, the sect master of the blood sword sect was very smart and avoided Ji Tianxing as much as possible. His main targets were Xuehuan, Xuelong, and Left Emissary Jean. He wanted to kill the 3 monarchs first before slowly dealing with Ji Tianxing. In any case, the surrounding 10,000 miles were all forbidden dragon blood grounds with special standpoints. In this area, the blood sword could communicate with the divine power of heaven and earth, as well as the scattered divine dragon power in the ground. It could be said that his power was limitless and inexhaustible. As long as the blood sword was not defeated, the sect master of the blood sword sect would be invincible. Soon, both sides exchanged over 100 moves. God Lord Xuelong and Left Emissary Jean were injured twice by the blood sword, and their injuries were even more miserable. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing decisively sent a voice transmission to the 3 monarchs. I will deal with the blood sword. You guys retreat to the outer circle and form a formation to defend. Don't let him escape. Xuelong, God Lord Xuehuan, and Left Emissary Jean already had this idea. However, they did not want to let Ji Tianxing fight alone because they wanted to save face. Thus, they did not say anything. Since Ji Tianxing took the initiative to suggest it, the 3 of them naturally agreed. They sent a voice transmission in unison. Thank you, young Master Tianxing, for your understanding. Young Master Tianxing, you must be careful. Don't worry, we will definitely not let him escape. Soon, the 3 monarchs retreated from the battlefield to 100 miles away. The 3 of them each took out 12 monarch-grade divine artifacts and inserted them into the ground in all directions, starting to set up a formation together. They were going to set up a sky demon space locking formation to seal an area of 300 miles. This monarch-grade high-grade divine array required at least 2 monarchs to set up and spend 8 days to set it up. However, the 3 monarchs could greatly shorten the time needed to set it up. In addition, the ruins of the sacred mountain had already been reduced to dust, leaving behind only a huge crater. The 18 monarchs and 800 elite experts had nothing to do for the time being. It was obviously unrealistic to expect them to besiege the blood sword sect master. Thus, they all took action to help the 3 monarchs set up the formation. With the help of so many experts, the time needed to set up the formation could be shortened by dozens of times. God Lord Xuehuan was confident that he could set up the formation and seal the blood sword sect master within 2 hours. Swish, 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 swish. Everyone worked together and shot out divine light that covered the sky, creating the formation's network on the ground. In a short 30 minutes, the formation's foundation was formed. Then, everyone used all their strength to set up the formation, each of them displaying their strongest abilities. At this time, the battle between Ji Tianxing and the blood sword sect master had reached its climax. although Ji Tianqing, who had transformed into a 1,000-meter-tall golden-armored war god, was already covered in wounds, his power was still as strong as ever. However, his power was still as violent as ever, as if he would never tire. As for the 1,000-meter-tall blood-red sword, it was also covered in wounds, with dozens of gaps. The blood-red light that the sword emitted was clearly much dimmer, and the sword intent was not as sharp and powerful as before. Without a doubt, the blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianqing, and the injuries were not light. The blood sword sect master had fused with the blood-red sword, so he was naturally injured as well. The blood sword sect master could not accept or believe this result. He found it very hard to believe that the monarch-grade high-grade blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianqing. This made him very suspicious. What grade was the pitch-black sword in Ji Tianqing's hand? Was it also a supreme-grade monarch-grade sword? Or perhaps a legendary king-grade divine artifact? Actually, Ji Tianqing was also very puzzled by this question. A long time ago, he had always thought that the Burial of Heaven sword made from origin stones was a heaven-grade divine artifact. After all, origin stones were more powerful than ordinary divine stones, and their origins were mysterious. It was understandable that the Burial of Heaven sword's grade was higher than ordinary true god-grade divine artifact. However, he only realized after coming to the god realm. The Burial of Heaven sword's grade was not as simple as heavenly god grade. Even if it faced various monarch-grade divine artifacts, it would still be able to forcefully clash with them, and it would not be at a disadvantage. This made Ji Tianqing very surprised. Could it be that the Burial of Heaven sword had become a monarch-grade divine artifact? All these years, the Burial of Heaven had been working hard to recover, and the results were actually so obvious? Today, the Burial of Heaven sword had faced the supreme grade blood-red sword. It was still not at a disadvantage. Not to mention how much the Burial of Heaven sword was better than the blood-red sword, it was at least evenly matched. Only now did Ji Tianqing realize that the Burial of Heaven sword made from origin stones was actually comparable to a supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifact. Of course, he was 100% sure that the Burial of Heaven sword could only stop at monarch grade. It was definitely not a king-grade divine artifact. This was because king-grade divine artifacts were very special. They were extremely powerful divine artifacts that contained the principles of the Great Tao. Since it's not a king-grade divine artifact, it's invincible among monarch-grade divine artifacts. In that case, the Burial of Heaven sword should be one of the strongest monarch-grade divine artifacts. Chapter 2986. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The battle between Ji Tianqing and Sect Master Blood Sword had long since reached its most intense stage. Both sides had exchanged close to 10,000 moves, and all the divine abilities and skills they could use had been used once. Their divine power had been consumed too intensely, and they were almost completely exhausted. However, both of them were exceptionally talented. One had the support of the Blood Sword and the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, and could still maintain 50% of his strength. The other had the Heaven Mending Pearl and the 5 Elements World to replenish his energy, and he would never tire. His divine power was always abundant, and his battle strength was always at its peak. Comparing the two, Sect Master Blood Sword's fate was naturally more miserable. The 3,000-meter-tall Blood Sword was already covered in cracks and gaps, as if it had grown a row of sawteeth. The blood light had dimmed, and its power was much weaker than before. In fact, the Blood Sword had become less offensive and more defensive. Most of the time, it was weary of blocking Ji Tianqing's attacks, and occasionally finding an opportunity to counterattack. Based on the current situation, Sect Master Blood Sword would be defeated in an hour at most. At that time, he would definitely die with his sword destroyed. However, Ji Tianqing was not satisfied with this result, and he was still anxious. An hour later, he would be able to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Sect Master Blood Sword. To him, this was simply too slow, because he had been calculating the time. He had to kill Sect Master Blood Sword before the experts of Sect Master Blood Sword returned. Otherwise, the situation would become even more complicated, and Sect Master Blood Sword might take the opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, no matter how anxious he was, it was useless. Sect Master Blood Sword did not show himself at all, hiding in the Blood Sword like a turtle. Relying on the Blood Sword's protection, he could continue to stall for time. After all, the Blood Sword was a genuine Supreme-grade Monarch-grade divine artifact. It was only 2 hours, so he could hold on no matter what. Soon, another 30 minutes passed. Ji Tianxing's attacks did not weaken at all, and he continued to brandish the Burial of Heaven, sending out sky-covering sword lights to attack the Blood Sword. Sect Master Blood Sword's injuries were even more severe, and he was even weaker. However, he also understood. He had actually given up on resisting and breaking out of the encirclement, and changed to using all his strength to defend and defend. The 3,000-meter-long Blood Sword shrank to about 30 meters and entered the depths of the earth. Under the control of the Blood Sword Sect's Sect Master, the Blood Sword released invisible divine power and frantically absorbed the dragon blood divine power in the ground. At the same time, the Blood Sword Sect Master also used his Sword Dao divine ability to form an illusory sword net. An oval-shaped dark red sword net floated deep underground. No matter which angle Ji Tianxing attacked from, the sword net was able to block all of them. Even though the net of swords would constantly shatter and collapse if it received too many attacks. However, the Sect Master of the Blood Sword Sect was constantly repairing the sword net and replenishing its defensive power. Even if the sword net would be broken through sooner or later, the Blood Sword would definitely shatter. But by doing so, he could stall for more time. Not to mention 2 hours, even 4 hours would not be a problem. Finally, 2 hours passed. A 7-colored light barrier with a radius of 300 miles appeared between heaven and earth, sealing this area. Shua! Ji Tianxing and the Sect Master of the Blood Sword Sect were both sealed by the 7-colored light barrier. At this moment, Left Emissary Jin's voice sounded in Ji Tianxing's mind. Young Master Tianxing, we've already set up the Celestial Fiend Space Sealing Array and sealed off the area within a radius of 300 miles. Don't worry, we'll maintain the array and not let the Blood Sword Sect Master escape. Hearing this news, Ji Tianxing only let out a sigh of relief, and was not very happy. This was because he could see that the Blood Sword Sect Master had no intention of escaping. The Blood Sword Sect Master probably still hadn't given up and wanted to wait for reinforcements to return so that he could make a comeback. The completion of the Celestial Fiend Space Sealing Array only served as a safeguard and did not have any substantial effect. You guys guard the array and prevent the reinforcements from returning. This sovereign will kill the Blood Sword Sect Master as soon as possible. Ji Tianxing transmitted to Left Emissary Jin. Then, he held the Sword of Burial of Heaven and used his Sword Dao divine ability to attack the Blood Sword deep underground. After fighting for so long, Ji Tianxing could already see some clues. The Blood Sword was deep underground and absorbing the mysterious dragon blood energy from the earth. It was precisely because of this that the Blood Sword's energy had not been exhausted, allowing Lin Shan to last until now. Ji Tianxing not only wanted to attack the Blood Sword, but also cut off the dragon blood energy. Thus, he used the Law of Earth and slashed out several giant swords. Bang! 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 With a deafening explosion, the rock layer deep underground was cut into several pieces by the swords. With the Blood Sword as the center, the surroundings were cut open. The rock stratum where the Blood Sword was turned into an isolated island. The connection between the island and the land around it had been severed. It became abnormally difficult for the Blood Sword to absorb the dragon blood energy from the surroundings. This move was indeed effective. The Blood Sword was continuously attacked, and its energy was constantly being consumed. However, it could not be replenished, and its power was rapidly weakening. The Blood Sword Sect Master's injuries were becoming more and more miserable, and he was becoming more and more anxious. 15 minutes later, the Blood Sword had even more cracks, and its light was even dimmer. The Blood Sword Sect Master's injuries were also very severe, and he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Ji Tianqing sped up his attacks, wanting to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Lin Shan. But at this moment, outside the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, a dazzling white light lit up, and deafening battle cries resounded. The sudden turn of events alarmed everyone in the field. Ji Tianqing hurriedly released his divine sense to investigate the situation several thousand miles away. He saw a 3-story treasure ship that was 10,000 feet long. It was shining with divine light as it sped toward the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. This antique treasure ship was extremely ancient in design. It even looked a little shabby and was filled with an ancient aura. The masts and sails of the treasure ship were covered in cracks and holes. One could vaguely see 4,000 to 5,000 gods in different attire on the treasure ship. They came from different races and wore different attire, but they were loyal to the same faction. Most of these people were heavenly gods. They wielded weapons like sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and other strange weapons as they shouted with killing intent. At the top of the treasure ship were more than 20 divine lords in purple, gold, and black robes. They were all aggressive and filled with killing intent. They all held sabers and Kenshin weapons in their hands. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned when he saw the appearance of these people. His eyes became serious. Damn it! 2 hours have just passed, and they really came back. The Blood Sword Sect Master, who was heavily injured, was originally dispirited and suffering greatly in his heart. Suddenly, he heard the battle cries outside the Forbidden Ground, so he also released his divine sense. When he saw the ancient treasure ship, he immediately became spirited, and his dim eyes suddenly glowed with radiance. Ha 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 ha! You brats really didn't disappoint me. I've held on for so long and finally waited for you to come back. Kill all the bastards of the Blood Blade sect. At the same time, Shui Huan, Divine Lord Blood Dragon, left Emissary Jean, and the others also used their divine sense to check the treasure ship. At first, they thought that the Blood Blade sect master had come with the elders and disciples to reinforce them. However, when they clearly saw the appearance of the treasured ship and those people, they immediately widened their eyes in shock, and their expressions became extremely unsightly. Chapter 2987. Heavens! It's not the sect master or the elders. Damn it! It's the bastards of the Blood Sword sect. They came back so quickly. Logically speaking, the sect master and the elders should have arrived long ago. Why haven't they appeared yet? Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left Emissary Jean were all filled with anxiety and worry. They watched as the ancient treasure ship quickly approached them. In 10 breaths at most, it would reach the Sky Demon Space Lock Array. Blood Illusion suppressed his shock and ordered, "Don't be in a daze. The reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect have returned. We must fight with all our strength. Block them outside the array. We can't let them stop young Master Tianqing from killing Lin Shan." Blood Dragon and Gold Left Emissary also calmed down and nodded in agreement. That's right. As long as we block the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect, young Master Tianqing will be able to kill Lin Shan soon. Once Lin Shan is killed and Blood Sword is destroyed, the Blood Sword sect will be leaderless. Those dogs will also scatter. The 3 divine lords hurriedly ordered the 18 divine lords to fight. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 18 divine lords unsheathed their Kenshin weapons and formed a battle formation in the sky, staring at the treasure ship. In addition, more than 600 experts flew out of the 18 battleships and formed a battle formation in the sky. The remaining 200 experts stayed in the 18 battleship. They were responsible for controlling the battleships and forming a battle formation to fight against the treasure ship and the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect. After a few breaths, the two sides engaged in close combat. The ancient treasure ship stopped when it was 10 miles away from the seven-colored barrier. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 20 god monarchs led more than 4,000 elite experts and flew out of the treasure ship. They split into more than 20 groups and charged at the Blood Blade sect with murderous intent. The bastards of the Blood Blade sect invaded our forbidden grounds, destroyed our sacred mountain, and tried to besiege the sect master. Today, we must kill them all and let their blood flow like a river. Blood Sword sect disciples, listen up. Kill the bastards of the Blood Blade sect at all costs. Anyone who kills one will be rewarded with 100,000 divine stones. Whoever kills the enemy's divine sovereign will be rewarded with a monarch-level divine ability, a divine artifact, and 10 billion divine stones. At the very front of the Blood Sword sect's group were two white-haired old men, their voices as loud as bells. They were the first elder and second elder of the Blood Sword sect. Their words greatly motivated the experts of the Blood Sword sect, causing their blood to boil and their fighting spirit to soar. As the saying goes, when there's a great reward, there's bound to be brave men. The sky-high bounty that head elder offered made everyone's eyes turn red from excitement. They became even more ferocious as they charged towards the people of the Blood Blade sect like bloodthirsty demonic beasts. Boom! Pung pung pung! Rumble! In the next moment, both sides clashed fiercely, colliding with each other and exploding with a loud bang. Thousands of divine abilities and secret arts burst forth with dazzling divine light, illuminating the heaven and earth for thousands of miles. All sorts of saber lights, sword shadows, and mountainous beasts clashed in the sky, shattering into pieces. The 18 divine battleships also shot out several hundred beams of light, which rained down on the Blood Sword sect members. Millions of shards of divine light were swept away by the violent shock waves and scattered in every direction. Chaotic and violent gales swept across the battlefield, sweeping across 3,000 miles. In just a single clash, both sides had suffered massive casualties. More than 60 disciples of the Blood Blade sect had been killed on the spot. The Blood Sword sect's experts had also suffered nearly 100 casualties. However, the auras of the two sides were completely different. The Blood Blade sect had their backs against the celestial demon's spatial lock array. They could only resist the charge of the Blood Sword sect, unable to retreat. Moreover, the number of enemies they were facing was 5 times their number. Unless a miracle occurred, they would undoubtedly lose this battle. Moreover, all of them would die on the spot. On the other hand, the Blood Sword sect's casualties were even heavier, but their morale was as high as a rainbow, their killing intent soaring. They had only suffered nearly 100 casualties, while they had more than 4,000 people. Even if they maintained this casualty rate, they would be able to quickly kill off the Blood Blade sect members. Once the Blood Blade sect members were all dead, they would still have 3,000 people left. What was there to fear? This was an unfair battle to begin with. Boom boom boom. Pung pung pung. The bitter battle continued. Over 40 divine lord powerhouses from both sides were fighting high up in the sky. The celestial god realm disciples and experts, on the other hand, were charging and breaking through the enemy lines at low altitude. Even though the 600 disciples of the Blood Blade sect had 18 divine ships supporting them, they had relied on the power of the divine ships to block the first 3 waves of attacks from the Blood Sword sect. However, when the Blood Sword sect's experts controlled the ships and unleashed a barrage of divine cannons, the Blood Blade sect's disciples suffered a calamity. With each passing second, the number of Blood Blade sect disciples rapidly decreased. Corpses after corpses were blasted to pieces by the divine light, causing a rain of blood to splatter. The Blood Blade sect's disciples grew more and more terrified, their fighting intent constantly dwindling. After 10 breaths of time, they had lost more than 200 people. The remaining 400 disciples were completely suppressed and could only do their utmost to resist. Seeing this, the blood sword sect's disciples became even more arrogant and charged even more valiantly. High in the sky, Divine Lord Blood Illusion's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw this. He anxiously shouted, "Left Emissary Jean, quickly ask young Master Tianxing why he still hasn't killed Lin Shan. Our disciples won't be able to last much longer. They'll all be killed soon." Left Emissary Jean was also anxious. He hurriedly replied, "That old bastard Lin Shan is hiding in the blood sword sect. Young Master Tianxing can't do anything to him. Even if young Master Tianxing uses all his strength, he'll still need an hour to kill him." An hour? Divine Lord Blood Dragon felt his vision darken. He was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. "By that time, our disciples will have all been killed. Even the three of us will be surrounded by thousands of people from the blood sword sect. We won't be able to keep our lives." Left Emissary Jean was in a dilemma. He tried asking, "Then what do we do? We can't ask young Master Tianxing to give up on Lin Shan and help us block the reinforcements of the blood sword sect, right?" "Impossible!" Divine Lord Blood Illusion shouted resolutely and angrily. "Don't forget that our original intention of establishing the Bloodblade sect was to kill Lin Shan. As long as we can kill that old dog, we won't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Bloodblade sect." Left Emissary Jean was startled. He felt great pain in his heart. His eyes were filled with hesitation and struggle. At this moment, at the edge of the forbidden area thousands of miles away, a five-colored divine light that blotted out the sky lit up again. There was a vast and vigorous divine power that was approaching them at lightning speed. Many divine lords sensed the abnormality and released their divine senses to investigate. The next moment, they discovered that there was a divine ship as black as ink at the edge of the forbidden area. It was speeding over at lightning speed. There was clearly a huge symbol of the blood blade on the ferocious-looking divine ship. Seeing this scene, the experts of the blood sword sect frowned. Their expressions became grave and fearful. As for Divine Lord Blood Illusion, Blood Dragon, and Left Emissary Jean, they heaved a sigh of relief. They were pleasantly surprised. "Ha ha ha ha! Sect Master has finally arrived. Great! Sect Master has finally arrived. Those bastards of the Blood Sword sect are dead for sure." Mobile version update website Chapter 2988. The divine ship that had arrived late was the Bloodblade sect master's ship. It rarely showed its face. However, it was a genuine monarch-grade high-grade divine ship. In a short 5 breaths, it arrived near the 7-colored barrier and above the battlefield. Bam! 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 Before the people on the divine ship had even appeared, countless cannons fired hundreds of scarlet flame pillars. Each scarlet flame pillar was 3,000 feet long and contained enough power to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! 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 Scarlet pillars of light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rained down on the blood sword sect's battle formation. The ancient ship was engulfed, and the 300 or so elites were also swallowed by the scarlet flames. Along with an earth-shattering explosion, a loud noise burst out. A few enormous holes were blasted open on the ancient treasured vessel on the spot, causing fragments to spray out into the sky, and it was on the verge of collapse. 80% of the 300 or so elites were killed on the spot. Only a few dozen experts were still alive, but all of them had severed limbs, and their injuries were horrible to look at. The morale of the Blood Sword sect took a huge hit. On the other hand, the disciples of the Bloodblade sect cheered and cheered. At this moment, a large group of figures flew out of the Black Divine ship. There were 6 god lords and over 1,000 sky god realm experts. The person in the lead was a graceful figure with a head full of white hair. She had a beautiful face and a seductive temperament. She had the appearance of a 28-year-old girl, the charm and gentleness of a 30-year-old girl, and the dignity and vicissitudes of a middle-aged woman. In short, her temperament was very complicated and special. She was wearing a long purple dress, and her bare feet were like jade as she walked through the air. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, and her waist-length white hair danced in the wind. She was indescribably bewitching and beautiful. She held a blood-colored saber that was 10 feet long and shaped like a crescent moon in her hands. This saber had a very special shape and contained a frightening and mysterious aura. The smooth arc of the blade flickered with a translucent blood-red light, as if it was alive. Everyone on the battlefield had complicated expressions when they saw the white-haired woman and the blood-colored saber. The people of the Blood Sword sect were extremely wary, while the people of the Blood Blade sect cheered. Because she was the leader of the Blood Blade sect. The outside world had many guesses about her and gave her many nicknames. White-haired Demon Blade, Blood Blade Demoness, Blood Blade Demoness, Bloodthirsty Demoness, and so on. It was obvious. None of the nicknames were positive. All of them were promoting her cruelty, bloodthirstiness, and viciousness. As expected, demonic blade Xue Lin streaked across the sky like a bloody light, heading straight for the Sky Demon Space Sealing Array. Those who block me die. With a roar filled with killing intent, she waved the blood saber in her hand and slashed out dozens of blood-colored blades of light at the 100 Blood Sword sect disciples in front of her. The hundreds of disciples who had formed a battle formation had no time to dodge. Ping ping ping, a series of muffled sounds exploded, and everyone was shredded into pieces by the blood-red light blade. A dark red rain of blood fell from the sky, emitting a nauseating stench of blood. Demon Blade Lin Xue didn't dodge. She passed through the blood rain and continued to rush towards the 7-colored light shield. Another 3 Sir Gods blocked her path. She held the blood saber with both hands and turned it into a bloody hurricane, violently sweeping over. Pung pung pung. The bloody hurricane violently crushed the Sir Gods of the Blood Sword sect, causing their flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. They screamed and flew backwards. One of them was killed on the spot, his godhead shattered. The other 3 were lucky not to die, but they were severely injured and their bodies were incomplete. Swish! Demon Blade Lin Xue finally crossed the sky and landed beside Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean. Sir Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean were filled with excitement as they hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Sect Master. Sect Master, you're finally here." Demon Blade Lin Xue didn't exchange greetings with them and directly asked in a deep voice, "How's the situation? Where's young Master Tianxing?" Left Emissary Jean hurriedly explained, "We can't help young Master Tianxing deal with Lin Shan, so we set up the Sky Demon Space Sealing Array and sealed off the surrounding 300 miles. Lin Shan, that old dog, is holed up in the Blood Sword, planning to resist until the end. Young Master Tianxing can't do anything to him for the time being. He needs at least an hour to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Lin Shan." Even so, Lin Xue was still shocked when she heard this. Her silver eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually won against Lin Shan in a one-on-one battle? He forced Lin Shan to hold up in the Blood Sword? That's right. Young Master Tianxing is far stronger than we imagined. Sir Blood Illusion hurriedly said, "Sect Master, enter the array and help young Master Tianxing kill Lin Shan. With the help of the elders, reverends, and disciples, we can block the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect." Lin Xue glanced back. A few elders and consecrators were leading thousands of experts to fight bravely. More than 30 disciples stayed in the divine ship and were crazily bombarding the Blood Sword sect's battle array. Although the Blood Sword sect had thousands of people, they were surrounded by enemies and their morale was unstable. The Blood Blade sect could hold on for a short period of time. Thus Lin Xue nodded and said, "Okay, hold on for a while longer. I'll go and kill that useless dog Lin Shan now." After saying this, she passed through the 7-colored light barrier and entered the array. As soon as she entered the array, she saw that the ground within 300 miles had turned into ruins. The once majestic sacred mountain was gone, and all she could see were deep pits and ravines. This made her very excited and happy. She hurriedly released her divine sense to search for traces of Ji Tianxing and Lin Shan. In the end, Ji Tianxing and the blood sword were fighting deep underground. The blood sword had shrunk to about 10 feet, and its light was dim. It was very weak. Ji Tianxing's aura was still as imposing as before. His divine power was abundant, and his battle prowess was formidable. Seeing the situation, Lin Shui was even more shocked. Her silver eyes seemed to see through the earth as she stared at Ji Tianxing. Heavens! What is this kid's background? He had fought Lin Shan one-on-one and had only suffered light injuries. He was still in peak condition. But he severely injured Lin Shan and only relied on the blood sword to preserve his life? Such a perverted guy. I've never seen him before, but I'm working with him? Lin Shui was a little dazed. She was so shocked that she was a little dazed. Before she saw Ji Tianxing with her own eyes, she didn't feel so shocked. Now that she saw it with her own eyes, she felt like she was in a dream and didn't dare to believe it. A thought even flashed through her mind. Is it because the heavens care for me? Seeing that my fate is full of misfortune, they sent him to avenge me? Just as she was in a daze, a low and indifferent voice sounded in her mind. The blood sword is special. Only your blood sword can counter it. Lend me your blood sword, and I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths. Without a doubt, the person who transmitted the voice was Ji Tianxing. Lin Shui immediately frowned and wanted to refuse. What kind of joke was this? The blood sword was passed down to her by her father, and she had long refined it into her natal divine weapon. This was the most important thing in her life. How could she lend it to a stranger? However, Lin Shui swallowed the words that she was about to blurt out. I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths, was too confident and domineering. It shocked her. For some reason, her right hand didn't listen to her and hit the blood sword into the ground. Swoosh! The blood sword turned into a red light and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. At this time, Ji Tianxing had already returned to his original appearance. He was holding the Burial of Heaven and fiercely attacking the blood sword. He held the blood sword in his left hand and the Burial of Heaven in his right hand. Burial of Heaven, lend me a hand! He used his divine soul to transmit his voice to the Burial of Heaven. Then, he clapped his palms together and combined the blood sword and the Burial of Heaven. Swoosh! At that moment, the blood sword emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky, and the Burial of Heaven burst forth with endless black light. The sword and the blade had strangely merged. Mobile version update website, Chapter 2989. Lin Shui was dumbfounded by this scene. Her eyes widened as she stared at the ground with her mouth agape. Her expression and eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually melted my blood blade? Shui Lin was a little absent-minded and felt her mind go blank. At the same time, the blood sword sect master was also shocked. He had already been heavily injured and was at the end of his rope. He was only able to block Ji Tianxing's ferocious attacks by relying on the blood sword's support and his all-out defense. But he knew very well that in at most an hour, his sword would be destroyed and he would die. Moreover, only the blood blade could counter the blood sword. These two supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifacts were originally a set, divided into yin and yang and male and female. The two complemented each other but also countered each other. Back then, in the hands of divine Lord Wufa and his wife, this pair of swords could display their strongest power and was almost invincible. However, in the hands of Lin Shan and Lin Shui, the two swords became mortal enemies. Lin Shan was also a bit worried that Lin Shui would use the blood blade to counter him. If that happened, he would not even be able to last an hour and would die. In the end, what he was worried about really happened. What was even more shocking was that Lin Shui actually gave the blood blade to Ji Tianxing. And Ji Tianxing actually fused the blood blade with his divine sword. What kind of operation was this? Lin Shan was very confused and had a bad premonition. Not good. That kid wants to use the power of the blood blade to defeat my blood sword. This thought flashed through his mind, and Lin Shan did not dare to hold on any more and ran without hesitation. Whoosh! The dark red blood sword turned into a bloody light and flew through the ground, escaping to the edge of the seven-colored light barrier. Obviously, Lin Shan wanted to get rid of Ji Tianxing and escape into the blood sword sect's battle formation. He wanted the experts of the blood sword sect to delay Ji Tianxing and Lin Shui to create a chance for him to escape. Winning or losing was no longer important. As long as he could escape the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and keep his life, it would be fortunate. This was Lin Shan's only thought. However, when the Burial of Heaven and the Blood Saber successfully merged, Ji Tianxing was destined to die the moment he made his move. Settle the 8 desolations. Ji Tianxing waved his left hand and pressed his palm into the ground. Instantly, the ground within a radius of several thousand miles was controlled and solidified. The incomparably strong resistance firmly suppressed the blood sword, causing it to be stuck in the underground rock stratum, unable to move. Then, Ji Tianxing held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his right hand and slashed with all his might. The appearance of the Burial of Heaven sword that had fused with the blood blade had undergone subtle changes. The blade of the sword was no longer perfectly straight. Instead, it was curved like a crescent moon, and shone even more coldly. A few scarlet veins could be seen on the pitch-black blade, as if fresh blood was flowing through them. This sword had become even more mysterious, and its power had also increased by 2 times. Boom! The black and red sword light sliced through the ground without any obstruction and hit the blood sword. Following a thunderous explosion, the blood sword was sent flying on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, and a loud explosion shook the heavens. The destructive shock wave blasted a massive crater with a radius of tens of thousands of feet. This caused the ground within a radius of several thousand miles to tremble violently. The blood sword fell into the rock stratum, its blood light flickering unsteadily, and its aura becoming chaotic. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that a gap had appeared on the blade of the blood sword, and several cracks had extended from it. A powerful dragon blood divine power was rapidly dissipating. After suffering such a heavy blow, not only was the blood sword injured, Lin Shan's injuries were even more miserable. Even his divine soul was shaken to the point of dizziness, and his consciousness became hazy. Soon, he came back to his senses. Without hesitation, he drove the blood sword out of the ground and fled towards the south. This time, he had learned his lesson. Knowing that Ji Tianxing had grasped the laws of Earth, he did not flee underground, and instead flew into the sky. However, this could not change the outcome. Ji Tianxing crossed 100 miles in one step, instantly catching up to the blood sword, and slashing down again. Duanren border! The Burial of Heaven sword fell from the sky, and slashed down with a black and red sword 100 zhang long. This enormous sword light contained the aura of death unique to the Burial of Heaven sword, and the unique Yao power of the blood sword. The blood sword did its best to dodge the enormous sword, but it was too late. With another boom, a loud explosion shook the 9 heavens. The Burial of Heaven sword's slash was the same as the previous one, at the gap in the blade. The blood sword could no longer endure the wild power, and was cut in 2. Crack! The blood sword broke in the middle, and dozens of dark red shards flew out. Dark red blood energy filled the sky. The 2 broken blades were sent flying, rolling and stabbing into the ground, trembling incessantly. After suffering such a heavy blow, the blood sword was almost destroyed. Lin Shan had been cut in half at the waist. His injuries were terrible, and his divine soul was even weaker. However, he did not give up. He was only a few dozen li away from the 7-colored light barrier in the south. Enduring his heavy injuries, he used his mind to control the 2 broken swords, and used all his strength to fly toward the 7-colored light barrier. As long as he passed through the light barrier, he would be able to enter the battlefield. At that time, with the cover of the experts of the Blood Sword sect, he would be able to escape. However, the two broken swords had just flown into the sky when Ji Tianqing attacked again. Heaven-piercing sword! With a low roar, he held the Burial of Heaven sword with both hands, and used 120% of his strength to slash at the broken sword. Crack! Following a crisp cracking sound, the broken sword with a hilt was cut in half once again. The broken sword fell to the ground and was buried in the dust of the ruins. Ji Tianqing directly ignored the broken sword with the tip of the sword, because he knew that Lin Shan was hiding in the hilt. As expected, the broken sword was cut in half again, and Lin Shan's injuries were even worse. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape with the broken sword. So, he escaped from the broken sword. He forced his battered body to turn into a streak of blood light and continued to flee to the south. Ji Tianqing had expected him to do this, and was already prepared to wait for him. Lin Shan had just flown tens of thousands of meters when the Burial of Heaven sword released a dazzling bloody light and slashed down. Bang! A deafening muffled sound suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth, reverberating endlessly. Under the dark red bloody light, Lin Shan's broken divine body could be clearly seen being cut in half by the Burial of Heaven sword. The two halves of the body couldn't withstand the violent power and actually exploded, splashing blood and debris into the sky. Lin Shan's divine body was destroyed, and he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. But his willpower was incomparably strong, and he still refused to give up struggling. Whoosh! A walnut-sized dark red divine spark flew out of the bloody rain and fled as fast as lightning. Ji Tianqing had already blocked in front of him, waiting for him to walk into the trap. He stretched out his left hand, and a golden heaven-capturing dragon claw directly grabbed Lin Shan's divine spark. At this point, the battle was over. Lin Shan fell into Ji Tianqing's hands, and his life and death were no longer in his control. Lin Shui watched the entire process dumbfoundedly, and the shock in her heart was indescribable. She silently calculated the time. It was exactly 10 breaths. Chapter 2990. From the fusion of the Burial of Heaven sword and the Blood Blade to Ji Tianqing killing Lin Shan and capturing his godhead. The process was very intense and thrilling. It sounded long, but in reality, it was only 10 breaths of time. Ji Tianqing was a man of his word, and he did as he said. From the beginning to the end, Lin Shui was in shock and witnessed the entire process with her own eyes. She couldn't help and only watched the entire battle. She didn't have the opportunity to attack and was so shocked that she forgot to help. This made her feel a little embarrassed. I'm a high divine lord after all. Even if I can't beat you and Lin Shan, I'm qualified to interfere in this battle and help. And the result? You only used 10 breaths of time to finish off Lin Shan. Wouldn't it be stupid for me to become a spectator? Thinking of this, Lin Shui frowned and was very unhappy. However, another thought occurred to her. Although I didn't help, I lent you my life artifact. You being able to get rid of Lin Shan is also thanks to me. Moreover, my original intention of establishing the Blood Blade sect and my unchanging belief for 1,000 years is to kill Lin Shan and take revenge. Now that I've taken revenge, I should be happy. Shui Lin's brows relaxed. Suddenly, the sky cleared up and she was filled with joy. Swoosh! She hurriedly flew across the sky and came to Ji Tianqing's side, looking at his left hand expectantly. Lin Shan isn't dead yet, right? Where's his godhead? Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword in his right hand and held it behind his back. His left hand clenched into a fist and slowly stretched out in front of Lin Shui. After spreading out his 5 fingers, a dark red godhead appeared in his palm. It was Lin Shan. However, Lin Shan's godhead was dim and his divine power was weak. Its surface was covered with cracks. Just now, Ji Tianqing grabbed his godhead and crushed it a few times, resulting in this result. Now, Lin Shan's soul was almost shattered and he was in a coma. He wouldn't wake up in a short period of time. I'm sorry, I destroyed his body and only captured his godhead. If we can capture him in one piece and hand him over to you, then we will have completed our mission. Ji Tianqing said calmly and handed the godhead to Xuelin. I'll leave his godhood to you. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. Xuelin stretched out her hands and held Lin Shan's godhead, standing there in a daze. She should have been overjoyed and relieved of a heavy burden. But for some reason, her attention wasn't on Lin Shan's godhead. She was actually staring at Ji Tianqing's back. This brat is so young, yet he already has such powerful strength. He's simply unfathomable. Moreover, he was so decisive and cold in his actions, and there was also an indescribable mysterious temperament. Who knows how many innocent young girls will be captivated by him? Xuelin's eyes were unfocused as she watched him leave. These thoughts flashed through her mind and she couldn't help but sigh. After a while, she came back to her senses and frowned. Bah! You old witch, what nonsense are you thinking about? Xuelin was a little ashamed, her cheeks inexplicably hot. She thought that she was a bloodthirsty and heartless witch who had long lost her feelings. Who knew that she would actually have such messy thoughts just now? Although she didn't have any thoughts of crossing the line, the appearance of these 7 emotions and 6 desires made her feel even more ashamed. She lowered her head and glanced at Lin Shan's godhead. She clenched her fists and put it into the interspatial ring. When she raised her head again, her eyes and temperament had already returned to coldness and indifference. Hey! Wait! Xuelin looked at Ji Tianqing's back and shouted loudly. 30 miles away, Ji Tianqing, who was walking on air, stopped. Without turning his head, he asked in an indifferent tone, "What else?" Xuelin's figure flashed and teleported 30 miles, appearing in front of him. She frowned and stared at him, asking with an unhappy expression, "You said that you would only borrow my blood knife. Now that you've used it, shouldn't you return the blood knife?" This was serious business. He absolutely couldn't forget. He had to give an explanation. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a calm expression, "You saw it just now, your blood knife has already merged with my divine sword." Xuelin's brows furrowed even tighter. She secretly clenched her fists in anger and shouted, "Then you mean you can't return it?" Ji Tianqing thought about it seriously and nodded. "That seems to be the case." Xuelin snorted and said even more angrily, "That's the divine knife my father passed down to me, the natal divine weapon that he cultivated with his life. You didn't give me a heads up and just merged it, you have to compensate me." Ji Tianqing blinked and said very honestly, "I told you that I wanted to borrow your blood knife. You only gave it to me after you agreed, didn't you?" "You?" Xuelin choked and glared at him. "I thought you only wanted to use it for a while. Who knew that you would use it all?" Ji Tianqing spread his hands, expressing helplessness. Xuelin wrinkled her nose and said fiercely, "Don't try to cheat, you have to think of a way to compensate me." Ji Tianqing thought for a while, and pointed at her hand and the ruins not far away. He said, "Lin Shan's godhead will be your compensation. If you think it's not enough, there are 3 pieces of the sword in the ruins. You can think of a way to put them back together, they should still be usable." This. Xuelin was startled, thinking that this result was not unacceptable. In fact, as long as she could kill Lin Shan and take revenge. Even if she had to sacrifice the blood knife and the entire blood knife sect, she would have no regret. However, she just couldn't stand Ji Tianqing's behavior. He was cold and arrogant, as if everything was right. This made her very unhappy. Seeing that she was silent, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, "If there's no problem, then I'll leave?" Xuelin frowned and didn't answer. Ji Tianqing asked again, "I'm really leaving?" Xuelin glared at him and waved her hand, "Forget it, I'm not going to bicker with a little guy like you. You can go. However, don't announce Lin Shan's defeat for now. Otherwise, those dogs of the Blood Sword sect will definitely scatter and flee, and I won't be able to catch them all in one fell swoop." Ji Tianxing was a little surprised and asked with a playful smile, "Oh? Weren't you very angry just now and insisting that I compensate you? Why are you suddenly so open-minded and willing to let me go?" Xue Lin glanced at him and said with a sad expression, "Originally, I founded the Blood Knife sect to deal with the Blood Sword sect and kill that bastard Lin Shan. Now that both the Blood Sword sect and Lin Shan have been destroyed, I have no more regrets. As for the Blood Knife and Sword, they're just worldly possessions. If they're gone, then so be it. After today's battle, I have no more worries and can retire with peace of mind." Ji Tianxing rubbed his nose and suddenly revealed a mischievous smile. "Sorry, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you." As he spoke, he flipped his right hand and a bloody light flashed in his palm. Xue Lin's crescent moon-like blood knife appeared in his palm in perfect condition. Losing the blood knife and recovering it, Xue Lin glared at Ji Tianxing angrily. "You brat! You dare to trick me?" Chapter 2991. Lin Xue was furious. In just a short while, her emotions fluctuated. She glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing, having the urge to strangle him. She thought the blood blade was still there, but it was gone. She thought it was gone and comforted herself. In the end, the blood blade appeared again. Wasn't this a deliberate prank? Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile and said sincerely, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I just wanted to see if you're as obsessed and bloodthirsty as the legends say." "And the result?" Lin Xue glanced at him, still not giving him a good look. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "The result is obvious. You're obsessed, but you haven't become a demon. You're just a poor woman with a deep blood feud." This was a very fair evaluation. For nearly 1,000 years, Lin Xue lived only for revenge, and her obsession was deep in her bones. However, she only hated the Blood Sword sect and Lin Shan, not bloodthirsty and cruel. But Ji Tianxing's words stimulated Lin Xue's nerve. Like a cat with its hair standing on end, she glared at Ji Tianxing and snapped, "What did you just say? Just a poor woman with a deep blood feud. That's it? Little brat. How old are you? Don't pretend to be deep in front of me. I've killed more people than you've seen." Lin Xue put away the blood blade and glared at Ji Tianxing angrily with her hands on her hip. She looked like she was teaching a junior a lesson. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianxing suddenly wanted to laugh. "Forget it, I won't bicker with you." He shook his head, chuckled, and turned to leave. Lin Xue was even angrier at his attitude. She followed him and shouted, "What do you mean? What's with that expression? Is it disdain? Are you looking down on me? Don't think that you're mysterious and amazing just because you're young and strong. Don't think that I'll be grateful to you and give myself to you just because you helped me take revenge. Stop right there. I'm going to teach you a lesson today and make you understand something. Although you are a monster, a genius, and an outstanding person, you have to understand the basic manners of a person, and you can't look down on women." Lin Xue followed Ji Tianxing all the way to the edge of the array. Ji Tianxing felt a headache coming on. He quickly changed the topic and said seriously, "There's still fighting outside. The Bloodblade sect's disciples won't be able to hold on much longer." The people of the Blood Sword sect didn't know what had happened inside the Grand Formation, nor did they know that Lin Shan had already been defeated. "I can't show myself. Otherwise, when they guess that Lin Shan is defeated, they will scatter. How about this? I'll leave while you go and kill the remaining members of the Blood Sword sect. If there's anything else, just send me a message." After hurriedly giving out instructions, he passed through the 7-colored light barrier and left the grand array without looking back. Sure enough, the battle was still going on in the forbidden area outside the formation. The Blood Sword sect had the upper hand, and more than 4,000 people were attacking the Bloodblade sect. The people of the Bloodblade sect held on bitterly, and their numbers continued to dwindle. Ji Tianxing used the Armillary Heaven's secret art, entered a state of invisibility, and flew toward the south. Lin Xue followed him out of the grand array. Without looking at the battlefield, she hurriedly sent a message to him. The battle is about to end. Where are you going? Ji Tianxing flew through the sky without looking back and replied, I'm going to the royal capital to take care of business. Lin Shui frowned and asked somewhat unwillingly, You've helped this old lady so much. This old lady must properly thank you and reward you with treasures and wealth. Can't you stay a few more days and come back to the Bloodblade sect with this old lady? This time, Ji Tianxing did not reply. He had already flown far away. Lin Shui stood in place and looked toward the southern horizon, stomping her feet in annoyance. Humph! You don't know what's good for you. This old lady was planning to give you half of the Bloodblade sect, but you don't want it. Don't think that just because this old lady is indebted to you, this old lady will pester you and repay you. She muttered angrily, but no one could hear her. Suppressing her anger, she looked at the nearby battlefield and immediately erupted with a frightening killing intent. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, all of you must die. Lin Shui roared with killing intent. Dragging the long and narrow blood blade with both hands, she charged into the battlefield like a streak of blood-colored light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Blade light filled the sky and a blood-colored hurricane swept out. Several dozen experts of the Bloodblade sect were immediately dismembered by the bloody hurricane, turning into a rain of blood and flesh. When this Bloodblade witch entered the battlefield, the end of the Bloodblade sect had arrived. An entire hour later, the battle in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land finally came to an end. The result was without suspense. More than 4,000 experts of the Bloodblade sect and more than 20 divine lords had all died in battle. The land within a radius of thousands of miles was covered in broken limbs and blood. There were also fragments of treasure ships, weapons, and armor. The Forbidden Land was a scene of desolation, with deep pits and ravines everywhere. The bloody light and bloody mist that blotted out the sky lasted for 3 days before dispersing. After the battle ended, Lin Shui returned to her ship to rest. After killing more than 1,000 people, her body was filled with a terrifying stench of blood, as if she was a god of death. The guards in the hall were all extremely respectful to her. 15 minutes passed. Left Envoy Jean, who was in charge of checking the battle results, returned to the hall and reported to Lin Shui. Congratulations, sect leader. Congratulations, sect leader. Our sect obtained a complete victory in this battle and killed nearly 5,000 experts of the Bloodblade sect, including 23 divine lords. Only one Sir God and more than 50 experts managed to escape in the chaos with heavy injuries. However, the Blood Dragon Right Envoy has already led people to pursue them. I believe that there will be good news soon. At that time, the remnants of the Bloodblade sect will all be wiped out. After this battle, not only will we be able to avenge you, but our sect will also replace the Bloodblade sect as the 5th great sect. Lin Shui calmly listened to his report. She only paid attention to the first half of the report and was not interested in the second half. How are the casualties of our sect? Left Envoy Jean was startled for a moment before he lowered his head and replied, reporting to Sect Master, the number of our disciples is 5 times less than the Bloodblade sect. Therefore, the casualties of our sect are slightly greater. More than 160 elite disciples died in battle, and more than 600 experts died in battle. Even out of the 18 Sir Gods, 7 of them had perished. However, their sacrifice was worth it to successfully exterminate the Bloodblade sect. Lin Shui nodded slightly and ordered, Left Envoy Jean, you are in charge of the rewards of the meritorious disciples and the compensation of the injured disciples. According to the sect's previous rules, give the meritorious disciples and the injured disciples 10 times the reward and compensation. 10 times? Left Envoy Jean was stunned and his eyes widened in disbelief. The rules of the Bloodblade sect were very humane and valued friendship. If an elite disciple died in battle, his family would receive 5 million godstones as compensation. If it was 10 times the compensation, it would be 50 million godstones. Left Envoy Jin's heart twitched and his hands trembled. He wanted to howl in grief. Sect Master, even if you have taken revenge and are in a good mood, you can't be so willful. With 10 times the compensation, our sect's treasury will be emptied and we will soon go bankrupt. Mobile version update website Chapter 2992. Of course, Left Emissary Jin could only think about it. Since the sect master had given the order, he couldn't go against it and could only obey. When he announced the news to the disciples and god lords were overjoyed. Everyone was moved to tears and shouted that the sect master was mighty and that they would forever be loyal to the Blood Blade sect. Next, Left Emissary Jin led people to treat the injured and counted the names of the dead disciples. By the time he was done, 4 hours had passed. Thus, the people of the Blood Blade sect boarded the divine ship and left the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. The once glorious Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground was annihilated in the flames of war and completely silent. For a long time after that, there were many experts and powerhouses who came to investigate the situation in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land every day. Countless people sighed and found it hard to believe. How could the Blood Sword sect, which had once been as domineering as the sun in the sky, disappear just like that? After Lin Shui's divine ship left the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, it arrived at the branch outside Shanyang County City. Through the teleportation array in the branch, they left Shanyang County. After half a day, the divine ship finally returned to the headquarters of the Blood Blade sect. At this time, the news of the destruction of the Blood Blade sect had already spread throughout Shanyang County. The news of this earth-shattering explosion was spreading at an extremely fast speed to all the counties. At the Blood Blade sect's headquarters, something shocking had happened as well. Sect Master Lin Shui arranged the follow-up matters in just one day. Then, she gathered the elders, reverends, and deacons and announced the dissolution of the Blood Blade sect. Once this news came out, everyone was stunned. More than 20 god lords were like petrified statues. They stood in the hall and couldn't make a sound for a long time. No one could believe that the sect master would dissolve the Blood Blade sect at its most glorious moment. Before they could enjoy the fruits of victory, they were dismissed. This was like a bolt from the blue. After everyone came back to their senses, they all objected and tried to persuade the sect master. There were even some emotional elders and deacons who knelt on the ground and cried. But Lin Shui was abnormally calm and her attitude was firm. Shui Huan and Left Emissary Jin were also in the hall. Their expressions and emotions were very complicated. Although the two of them had a premonition. Many years ago, they had guessed that revenge was the sect master's greatest belief. Once he took his revenge, the sect master would have nothing to worry about and would no longer manage the Bloodblade sect. In any case, the sect leader was not ambitious and did not yearn for power and status. The purpose of the Bloodblade sect's existence was to deal with the Bloodsword sect, even though the two of them were already mentally prepared. But when they heard the sect master announce the news in front of everyone, their hearts still felt heavy and uncomfortable. After waiting for a while, Shui Lin explained the reason. Other than the vice sect leader and Left Emissary Jin, the others may not know that I founded the Bloodblade sect for revenge. Now that I've gotten my revenge, the evil beast Lin Shan has also fallen into my hands. My wish has been fulfilled, so I have no more worries. I just want to live in seclusion and stay away from the disputes and slaughter in the mortal world. However, please rest assured that I will distribute all of the Bloodblade sect's assets to those who have contributed greatly. This way, we won't let down everyone's dedication to the sect for so many years. After speaking, Shui Lin stood up from the throne and said in a serious tone, "Everyone, I have made up my mind. No one needs to persuade me anymore." The elders and deacons looked at each other and discussed secretly. Their hearts were heavy and complicated. At this moment, two deacons knelt on the ground and said with a sobbing tone, "Sect leader, the Bloodblade sect is the result of all of us spending half of our lives. Without the Bloodblade sect, we will be lonely ghosts in the future. Even our families will have nowhere to go. If the sect leader is tired of the mortal world and is no longer willing to manage the affairs of the sect, then please allow me to beg you. You can abdicate the position of sect leader and withdraw with peace of mind. This way, we can still create glory under the leadership of the new sect leader. Hearing this deacon's suggestion, the deacons and elders with heavy hearts immediately brightened and became spirited. Everyone weighed the pros and cons and agreed, asking Shui Lin to abdicate the position of sect leader and keep the Bloodblade sect. These elders and deacons were all very smart. Although the Bloodblade sect was disbanded, they could receive astronomical compensation and rewards. However, if the Bloodblade sect was kept, they could enjoy power and status and obtain countless wealth and resources in the future. Furthermore, as one of the 5 major sects, the Bloodblade sect's descendants would be protected for 10,000 years. Because of this, everyone took the risk of angering Shui Lin and persuaded her to abdicate the position of sect leader. In a short while, all the deacons, elders and guardians bowed and begged Shui Lin to abdicate the position. Only the blood illusion god and gold-left emissary stood quietly beside Shui Lin and did not say anything. Furthermore, everyone was well aware of the situation. If Shui Lin abdicated the position of sect leader, the two of them had the highest chance of succeeding. Shui Lin looked at everyone calmly and shook her head gently. She said sincerely, "I have my own reasons for disbanding the Bloodblade sect, but there are also more important considerations. It is indeed worth celebrating that we have destroyed the Blood Sword sect. However, we have also suffered heavy losses and will only be able to recover after 10 years. Furthermore, there are 2 powerful mountains behind the Blood Sword sect. They are not people we can offend. They will definitely try to disband the sect while it is weak. Everyone present today was their target to be killed. Is glory and wealth more important, or the lives of our disciples and brothers more important?" After saying this, she looked at everyone with a dignified gaze and observed their reactions. Many of the elders and deacons were astonished. Everyone looked at each other and started to discuss secretly. After all, they did not know the background of the Blood Sword sect, nor did they know who was behind the Blood Sword sect. Now that the sect leader had said it, she had already considered it. How could they not be worried? After hesitating for a while, many elders and deacons gave up on persuading her. Although there were still a few people who were unwilling, the situation was already decided. The Bloodblade sect was bound to be disbanded. Gold-left emissary stood out and persuaded everyone, "In 3 days, the sect leader will retire. Everyone, take the treasures and wealth you deserve and leave the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom as soon as possible. You can either go to a foreign country and establish your own sect, or you can live in seclusion and cultivate the divine Tao. In short, like the sect leader, I hope that everyone can live the rest of their lives peacefully." After another hour's delay, the group of elders, deacons, and reverends finally left with complicated feelings. In the next 2 days, Gold-left emissary and Blood Dragon right emissary followed Shui Lin's instructions and took charge of the disbanding matters. Batch after batch of disciples, deacons, and elders of the Bloodblade sect left the Bloodblade sect with great wealth and treasures. 3 days later, everyone in the Bloodblade sect's headquarters was dismissed. Next, only the assets and wealth of the various branches were left to be handed over and distributed. Gold-left emissary and Blood Dragon right emissary took care of those trivial matters. Shui Lin took Blood Illusion God Lord and quietly left the headquarters for the imperial capital. Mobile version update website Chapter 2993. Originally, a top force like the Bloody Blade sect had many properties and complicated personnel. Even if she wanted to disband the sect, disband the various branches and 10,000 people, it would take a long time. But Lin Shui was already prepared and had a corresponding plan. As long as she successfully killed Lin Shan and took her revenge, she could immediately disband the Bloody Blade sect. More importantly, she did not need to do it herself. Left emissary Jean and right emissary Blood Dragon would do it. When she left the Bloody Blade sect, only Sir God Blood Illusion followed her. The two of them used the transportation formation and crossed 3 counties, successfully entering the Bloody Flame County. This was the largest and most prosperous county in the Holy Kingdom, because the county was the capital of the Holy Kingdom. After entering the Bloody Flame County, Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion could not use the transportation formation to travel. The two of them could only drive the god ship and speed in the sky. The journey was long. Even with the speed of the god ship, it would take 2 days to reach the capital. Along the way, Sir God Blood Illusion asked Lin Shui about his doubt. Sect Master, the Bloody Blade sect was founded by you and developed for almost 1,000 years. It is also the product of your hard work. Disbanding and giving up like this, won't you have any regrets? Lin Shui answered calmly, there's nothing to regret. I'm tired of scheming and cheating. Being bound by the sect, I have no freedom and no chance to reach higher realms of the divine path. Even if it develops for another 2,000 or 3,000 years, it will only expand the Bloody Blade sect's influence by 2 or 3 times. By then, the Bloody Blade sect will, at most, become the second sect. If I concentrate on cultivating and reach the Divine King realm, after 2,000 or 3,000 years, even if I can't reach the Divine King realm, I will definitely be a peak Divine Emperor. Hearing this, Sir God Blood Illusion nodded in agreement. That's right. Instead of slowly strengthening the sect, it's better to focus on improving oneself. If I can reach the Divine King realm and become a supreme expert, I can crush countless holy kingdoms alone. No matter how strong the sect or holy kingdom is, it is nothing in front of a Divine King expert. After a pause, he asked again, Sect Master, since you have already disbanded the sect and are preparing to concentrate on cultivating the divine path, why are you still heading to the capital? You know that in the next 2 or 3 months, there will be major events happening in the capital. It won't be peaceful. Sir God Blood Illusion did not say it, but both of them knew it. In a few days, the divine blood ceremony would begin. When the time came, prodigies from all over would gather in the capital city. Countless powerhouses and forces would flock there. The royal city would be very lively, but also very dangerous. Godlord Blood Illusion believed that after Shui Lin disbanded the Crimson Blade sect, she would very likely return to the Celestial Fey Empire and live in seclusion. He would always accompany Shui Lin, be her attendant and guard, protect and take care of her forever. But he did not understand why Shui Lin would go to King City. Shui Lin looked in the direction of the Imperial City and smiled. She said in a playful tone, My trip to the Imperial City has nothing to do with the Divine Blood ceremony. That's a feast for young geniuses. It has nothing to do with me. Moreover, the news of the destruction of the Blood Sword sect and the disbanding of the Blood Sword sect should have spread to the capital and reached the ears of all the major forces. Now that we've entered the capital, we're indeed in a perilous situation. But I had to go. After all, the consequences of eliminating the Blood Sword sect had yet to be revealed. We have to face it personally. We can't let him suffer for us. Sir God Blood Illusion was stunned and said with a strange tone, Him? Are you talking about young Master Tianxing? Shui Lin nodded slightly. Sir God Blood Illusion frowned and said, No wonder he quietly left the battlefield after defeating Lin Shan. So he went to the Imperial City. I've never understood why he didn't stay behind to celebrate the destruction of the Blood Sword sect when he deserved the greatest merit. With your personality, you would have given him an incomparably generous gift of thanks. Could it be that young Master Tianxing is indifferent to fame and fortune and doesn't care about resources and wealth? But if that's the case, why did he go to the Imperial City? Could it be that he wants to participate in the Divine Blood ceremony? Shui Lin shook her head and said calmly, It's not that he's indifferent to fame and fortune, nor is it that he looks down on my gift of thanks. It's because he's already guessed my next plan. His vision is even further than ours. How so? Sir God-Blood Illusion was even more puzzled. Xue Lin patiently explained, if I had given him a gift of thanks, I would have given him at least several billion godstones or resources. Reality has proven that these resources are not that important to him. He only needs to use a little trick to easily obtain them. But those several billion godstones are an enormous fortune to the disciples of the Blood Sword sect. He would rather not give me a gift of thanks and fulfill my plan so that I can smoothly disband the Blood Sword sect. This is the first reason. The second reason is that he already knew that the Blood Sword sect had the support of a prince and that it involved the number one sect, the Heavenly Unity sect. Regardless of the reason, the Blood Sword sect was able to latch onto the Heavenly Unity sect. If we destroy the Blood Sword sect, that prince and the Heavenly Unity sect will take revenge on us. On the surface, it seems that the faction that destroyed the Blood Sword sect is our Blood Sword sect. But in reality, all the great sects understand that the person who truly destroyed the Blood Sword sect is young Master Tianqing. If he stays in the Blood Sword sect, he will attract the revenge of a large number of experts and endanger the disciples of the Blood Sword sect. Thus, he took the initiative to go to the Imperial City and deliver himself to his opponent. This way, the revenge against him will only be carried out in the Imperial City. And the Blood Sword sect will be able to avoid this calamity and smoothly disband according to my plan. Since I've already guessed his intentions, how can I let him fight alone and face the dangers from all sides? I have to join hands with him to survive this calamity. Only then can I retire with a clear conscience. Sir God-Blood Illusion was extremely shocked at these words, and an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. When you killed Lin Shan, young Master Tianqing had already considered this. Moreover, you and Sir Tianqing have only met once. How do you know each other so well? Is this what it means to have telepathy? Xue Lin waved her hand and said with a playful smile, wrong, it's not telepathy, but because there are thousands of stupid people, but smart people are all the same. Whatever we could think of, he had already thought of, even further than us. Moreover, I have a strong premonition that he will definitely participate in the Divine Blood ceremony. This time, the Divine Blood ceremony would become even more exciting because of his appearance. In fact, there might even be unforeseen changes that occur. Sir God-Blood Illusion was even more dumbfounded. He asked in puzzlement, Sect Master, although Mr. Tianqing is a top genius and an interesting person, he is still a genius. However, the Divine Blood ceremony had been going on for several thousand years, and it had always followed the rules without any problems. Aren't you thinking too much? Xue Lin glanced at him and said calmly, there is only one step between stupidity and cleverness. If you believe it, there is. If you don't, there is nothing. Moreover, that kid is a super troublemaker. Wherever he goes, he will cause trouble. The Imperial City is so lively, with many geniuses and heroes gathering. If he doesn't cause a big mess, he wouldn't be him. Sir God-Blood Illusion smiled awkwardly and said, why do I feel like you and he are old friends who have known each other for hundreds of years? Chapter 2994. Godly Lord Blood Illusion had followed Lin Shui for nearly 1,000 years. He was the first friend Lin Shui made after entering the Great Yin Empire. He was also her most loyal supporter. But until now, he still could not see through Lin Shui sometimes. With her experience, strength, and age, she should be a high and mighty demoness who killed decisively. Most of the time, she behaved as such. But for some reason, she would occasionally reveal some characteristics that did not match her age. For example, naivety, arrogance, and unruly. To Godly Lord Blood Illusion, it was more difficult than breaking through to the Godly Monarch realm to completely understand Lin Shui's thoughts. But today, his horizons had been broadened. Lin Shui and Ji Tianqing had only met once, but they understood each other so well. It was as though they were telepathic. Godly Lord Blood Illusion could not help but mutter. Could they have been friends for a long time? Or was there a special fate between the two of them? After a moment of silence, he cleared these unrealistic thoughts from his mind. He continued asking, Sect Master, Lin Shan's godhead is already in your hands. Don't you hate him the most? Why haven't you dealt with him yet? Why are you still putting him aside? At the mention of Lin Shan, Lin Shui's eyes immediately turned cold and sharp. She sneered and said in a sinister tone, That bastard is the person I hate the most in my life. How can I deal with him so carelessly? If I don't bring him back to the celestial Fey Empire and deal with him in front of my father's grave, how can I resolve the hatred in my heart? How can I comfort my father's soul in heaven? Godly Lord Blood Illusion was silent. He nodded and did not say anything else. At the same time, Blood Flame County, in another direction, Ji Tianxing was sitting on the back of a black dragon as he flew towards the imperial city. Since he left the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, he had been traveling for nearly 10 days and crossed 2 counties. He estimated that he would reach the imperial city in about 4 days, and the divine blood ceremony would be held in 6 days. He could still make it. It was worth mentioning that he had been attacked 3 times in the past few days. The first attack was when he left the border of Shanyang County. 9 middle-level godly lords led more than 100 heaven god experts and attacked him ferociously. The two sides fought fiercely for half an hour before Ji Tianxing killed them all. The results were remarkable. Not only had he obtained a large number of quintessence fragments, but he had also obtained several billion worth of resources and treasures. However, he was unable to find any identification on those people. Even so, Ji Tianxing didn't need to investigate to guess. Those people should be the remnants of the Blood Sword sect. The headquarters of the Blood Sword sect had been destroyed, and 80% of the elites and experts had been killed. However, the Blood Sword sect's sphere of influence was extremely vast. He had many branches under his command, as well as many consecrators and divine lord experts roaming the divine kingdoms. It was understandable that those remnants would ambush him in anger when they found out that the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land had been destroyed. Ji Tianxing was already mentally prepared, so he wasn't surprised at all. 4 days ago, he was attacked a second time in Guoyu County. There were only 4 Sir Gods who had attacked him. 3 middle-level God Monarchs and 1 7th-level God Monarch. The 4 Sir Gods had different styles and came from different clans. The divine abilities and consummate skills that they were good at were also rarely seen. In fact, these 4 Sir Gods might not even be citizens of the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom. Ji Tianxing guessed that they were most likely consecrators or hired thugs of some faction or noble. After a fierce battle, he successfully killed the 3 middle-level God Monarch. As for the High God Monarch, he had a spatial divine artifact. After being heavily injured by Ji Tianxing, he saw that the situation was bad and fled. Yesterday morning, Ji Tianxing had just entered the Blood Flame County. When he passed by a certain mountain range, he was attacked for the 3rd time. The people who attacked him this time were even more strange. 3 Sir Gods appeared at the same time. The leader was an ugly silver-haired old man with a sinister face. He had the strength of a 6th-level God Monarch. After the two sides exchanged several blows, the silver-haired old man and the 2 Sir Gods were injured. They actually stopped attacking and threatened Ji Tianxing not to enter the capital, or else they would lose their lives. After leaving behind a few harsh words, the 3 Sir Gods were about to leave. However, Ji Tianxing was even more ruthless. Without hesitation, he used the heaven-sealing sword formation and stopped the 3 Sir Gods. After a fierce battle, the 3 Sir Gods were killed by Ji Tianxing. Their godheads were also shattered. Next, he let the Black Dragon continue on his way. After entering the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, he refined the godhead fragments of the 3 Sir Gods in the distorted spacetime. He gained 10 new laws and his strength increased. These were secondary. The most important thing was that Ji Tianxing discovered that these 3 Sir Gods were actually from the Fiend Blood Palace. The 3 of them were Purple Star assassins. The silver-haired old man was the strongest and ranked very high. Previously, when Ji Tianxing was still in the Ning residence in the heavenly Snow County city, Duanmu Xiong had spent 10 billion divine stones to hire 2 Purple Star assassins from the Fiend Blood Palace to ambush Ji Tianxing in the Maplewoods Manor. The 2 Purple Star assassins were called 1,000 Star Extermination and 1,000 Star Kill. At that time, Ji Tianxing killed 1,000 Star Kill but spared 1,000 Star Extermination. 1,000 Star Extermination was severely poisoned and fled back to the Fiend Blood Palace with serious injuries. At that time, Ji Tianxing asked 1,000 Star Extermination to pass a message to the Fiend Blood Palace that they should not provoke him in the future. He did not expect that the Fiend Blood Palace would send 3 Purple Star assassins to deal with him in less than a month. Of course, the mission of these 3 Purple Star assassins was not to kill Ji Tianxing. They were only there to warn Ji Tianxing and pass a message to him. However, they did not expect that Ji Tianxing would fulfill his promise and kill them directly. It could be said that he had died a very sullen death. The Fiend Blood Palace should be a force under the second prince. At that time, I let 1,000 Star Extermination go and asked him to pass a message to the Fiend Blood Palace. I thought that the Fiend Blood Palace would retreat and not dare to deal with me again. Now, the Fiend Blood Palace obviously did not take my word seriously. Could it be that the second prince also wants to get involved in this mess and kill me? The enmity between Ji Tianxing and the second prince began because of the Qingshan city governor. The 50,000 sets of divine realm equipment were prepared for the second prince, but Jian Wushuang intercepted them. Later, it involved Princess Tianfeng, one of the second prince's confidants, who was also killed by Ji Tianxing. Thinking of these things, Ji Tianxing was already mentally prepared. When I enter the royal city this time, not only will I have to bear the revenge of the little prince, but I will also be targeted by the second prince. Even the people of the He Tian sect are likely to attack me. The royal city must be very lively, right? Ji Tianxing sat on Black Dragon's back, looking at the southern sky and muttering to himself. At this time, White Dragon, who was standing behind him, asked, "Master, Black Dragon has been on the road these days. You have been cultivating in seclusion in the Divine Tower for a long time. You have refined the Godhead fragments of those divine emperors. How many laws have you mastered? Are you about to break through the 4th stage and become a middle-level divine emperor?" When Ji Tianxing was in seclusion in the Divine Tower, White Dragon guarded the Divine Tower while Black Dragon carried him on the road. Ji Tianxing came out of seclusion an hour ago. Hearing White Dragon's question, Ji Tianxing said with a smile, "I have refined the Godhead fragments of 3 batches of divine emperors. The number of laws I have mastered has reached 190, which is comparable to that of a divine emperor in the 9th stage. As for the 4th stage, I won't be able to reach it in a short time." Chapter 2995. Ji Tianxing's answer made Bai Long feel a little regretful. Although Master has mastered as many as 190 laws, I reckon that in the entire Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, there is no second person who is as strong as you. But after all, you are still a lower Divine Lord, and have not broken through to the middle Divine Lord. Entering the Imperial City this time, you will face the Divine Kingdom's top expert. Moreover, the various forces are likely to join forces to deal with you. If you can break through to the 4th stage, we will have nothing to worry about. Bai Long sighed with some regret and muttered softly, "If not, you don't have to be protective of the fairer sex. If you can keep that blood saber, our chances of winning will be much higher." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and asked with a faint smile, "Do you think that I return the blood saber to Xuelin because I am protective of the fairer sex?" Cough cough. Bai Long coughed twice to hide his embarrassment and said with a smile, "No, Master, that is called the demeanor of a powerhouse. You don't want to take advantage of others." Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes at him. "I'm too lazy to talk to you. Let Burial of Heaven explain." Burial of Heaven's deep and powerful voice immediately sounded in Bai Long's mind. Shui Lin's blood saber was originally a monarch-grade artifact of the demon clan. It was transformed from the sharp teeth of the ancient demon king. After 10,000 years of killing and blood infiltration, the demon saber has long turned into a killing blade. The blood aura is too strong. Even Shui Lin was infected by the blood saber's killing aura and her soul became chaotic. As a result, her personality was erratic and unpredictable. Moreover, that blood saber is destined to not become a monarch-grade artifact. If I refine it and completely integrate it, it will affect my quality and power. In the future, it will be even more difficult to restore it to a monarch-grade artifact. After listening to Burial of Heaven's explanation, Bai Long suddenly understood and nodded. You mean that the blood saber has caused Shui Lin to have a split personality? The blood saber's material and power are special. It is destined to not become a monarch-grade artifact, so you don't like it? Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, You can say that. Bai Long hurriedly looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, Master, is that witch really suffering from schizophrenia? Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, Yes, but it's not too serious at the moment. Then why did you return the blood knife to her? Her condition will definitely get worse in the future, White Dragon asked, puzzled. Ji Tianxing frowned and said, The Burial of Heaven can't devour the blood saber, so why would I keep the blood saber? Of course he had to return it to her. The matter with the Blood Sword sect wasn't over yet. If she lost her blood saber, how could she protect herself from so many experts? As for whether or not her schizophrenia will worsen in the future, what does that have to do with me? Bai Long rubbed his chin and said with a playful smile, Master, according to this disciple's understanding, you are not such a heartless person. That demoness is obviously interested in you. Don't you plan to help her? Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly. And then? Bai Long smiled and said in an even more strange tone, And then, if you do her a favor again, she will definitely be unable to resist and repay you with her body. As long as the red flag at home doesn't fall, the colorful flag outside flutters, he. Ji Tianxing frowned and narrowed his eyes. The corner of his mouth hooked into a cold smile and was about to make things difficult for him. At this time, a cold and disdainful voice suddenly sounded. He scum. The cold voice came from Qianyu, full of disdain and disdain. Ji Tianxing's brows relaxed and he looked at Bai Long with a playful smile. Did you hear that? Bai Long didn't dare to talk back to his master. He angrily scolded Qianyu, You little fox! Instead of cultivating in seclusion, you eavesdrop on our master and disciple conversation. You disappoint me. Qianyu's voice was still cold and full of disdain. You like being a scum, so don't lead old Ji astray. Besides, why are you so disappointed all the time? Hey! You stinking fox! Bai Long rolled up his sleeves and went into the divine pagoda to argue with Qianyu. Ji Tianxing dismissed it with a smile, no longer paying attention to their quarrel, and continued to meditate. Time passed quickly. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, soon 4 days had passed. On the morning of the 5th day, Ji Tianxing finally arrived at the imperial city. When he was still 1,000 miles away from the imperial city, he put away the black dragon and traveled alone. Whoosh! He sped across the sky and looked at the imperial city 1,000 miles away. The weather was clear and the sun rose from the east. Under the golden sun, the imperial city exuded an ancient and majestic aura. It was an ancient and majestic city with 10,000 years of history, located in the Changfeng mountain range. The Changfeng mountain range ran from north to south and stretched for nearly 10 million miles. It was one of the best divine ranges in the divine nation. The imperial city was located in the most majestic area of the mountain range. It was also the area with the most divine power. This majestic city was located on a towering mountain range of 10,000 miles. The mountain was like an ancient divine dragon lying on the ground. The majestic city was like a dragon on its back, commanding the wind and rain as it looked down on all living beings. It was different from other prefectural cities, which were all square in shape. This majestic city was built along the mountain ridge in the shape of a long strip. Its width was between 50 to 100 miles, but its length was more than 500 miles. Such a majestic city was large enough to accommodate 8 million people and deities. The ancient city walls were hundreds of feet tall and glowed with a black and red luster. One could clearly see the mottled traces of time. There were many tall buildings and palaces in the city. Countless residences and buildings were arranged in picturesque disorder. Under the morning sun, the glazed and golden tiles of the palaces reflected dazzling light. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense to investigate and saw that in the sky around him, there were many gods and powerhouses flying toward the imperial city like him. These gods and experts came from all over the divine nation. They were of different races and attire. There were the Blood Flame God race, the Raging Flame God race, the Crimson Blood God race, the Three-Eyed God race, the Indigo God race, the Heavenly Jade race, and other races. Most of the experts rode on mighty divine beasts or sat in luxurious carriages pulled by rare and exotic beasts. A small number of experts and commoners rode on divine ships or walked on air. Ji Tianqing knew that the flow of people in the imperial city was usually very large. The divine blood ceremony was about to begin. Countless gods would come to watch the ceremony. Thus, the number of people entering and leaving the imperial city was several times greater than usual. He had originally been considering whether he should disguise himself before entering the imperial city. But on second thought, he realized that only a few experts and sects knew his identity and background. The vast majority of people did not recognize him. Even if they passed by him, they would not give him a second glance. Even if he disguised himself, he would not be able to fool those who wanted to find him. Thus, there was no need to disguise himself. Thus, he openly landed outside the northern city gate and waited in line to enter the city. As soon as the 1,000-foot-tall city gate opened, a line of 100 people had already formed in front of it. Many gods and experts obediently took out their identity cards and waited in line to enter the city. No matter where the experts came from, they did not dare to cause trouble in front of the imperial guards. Ji Tianqing had only been in line for a short while when 4 silver-armored imperial guards suddenly walked out of the city gate and stopped him. Chapter 2996. There were more than 100 silver-armored imperial guards at the city gate. They had an iron-blooded aura as they stared at everyone who entered the city. The moment Ji Tianqing appeared, the captain of the imperial guards stared at him. After observing him carefully and confirming that it was him, the captain personally led 3 imperial guards to stop him. "You are Tianqing?" The captain of the imperial guards, who was burly and had a full beard, stared at Ji Tianqing with his red eyes and asked expressionlessly. The 3 imperial guards spread out and surrounded Ji Tianqing. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. It was as if they were trying to catch a fugitive. The surrounding citizens and experts immediately took a few steps back to avoid being implicated. At the same time, everyone looked at Ji Tianqing with vigilance and curiosity. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "That's me." The captain of the imperial guards nodded slightly and said in a dignified tone, "Please come with us." Ji Tianqing gave him a deep look, but he didn't refuse or resist. He only nodded. Then, he followed behind the captain of the imperial guards and was surrounded by 3 other imperial guards. They crossed the city gate and entered the imperial city. The surrounding citizens who were watching the show were curious and gloating. They started to whisper and discuss. "Who is that kid? Why is he being targeted by the imperial guards? It seems that he is a fugitive from the imperial city? Very likely. Every year, there will be a few foolish fugitives who think that they can fool others and try to sneak into the imperial city. In the end, they are all seen through by the imperial guard." He is being taken away by the Imperial Guard. That kid is in trouble. However, a few Sir God experts in the crowd frowned and pondered. Their expressions were complicated. Their strength and status were higher. Of course, they would not be as superficial as the ordinary citizens. Just now, they all heard the captain of the Imperial Guard say please. On the surface, the captain of the Imperial Guard's attitude was cold and dignified. But in reality, he was not disrespectful or offensive to Ji Tianqing. Moreover, they only took Ji Tianqing away. They did not escort or tie him up. If they really wanted to catch a fugitive, how could they be so gentle? When the divine lords noticed this, they could not help but be curious and speculate. Who was Tianqing? Suddenly, one of the divine monarchs thought of something that happened recently. Friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. She and Legend's expressions changed dramatically, and they exclaimed, "Is it him? How is this possible?" His exclamation attracted the attention of the people around him. Many commoners and a few divine lords looked at him and began asking questions. "Senior, who was that kid just now? Brother, do you know that white-robed brat? That kid is from a foreign race. Did he do something wrong?" The divine Lord Powerhouse remained silent, his expression solemn and indifferent. When everyone asked too many questions, he really couldn't stand the disturbance and endured it. He couldn't help but scold, "Stop trying to get to the bottom of this matter. That young master's identity isn't something that we can investigate." Seeing this divine lord's solemn expression and solemn tone, the crowd realized the seriousness of the matter and did not dare to pester him any further. The captain of the Imperial Guards and 3 other Imperial Guards led Ji Tianqing into the royal city. They walked along the wide bluestone road for 1,000 feet and turned into a secluded alley. Then, the captain of the Imperial Guards asked the 3 Imperial Guards to leave and face Ji Tianqing alone. He cupped his hands at Ji Tianqing and said respectfully, "Young Master Tianqing, there were too many people at the city gate just now. I had no choice but to offend you. Please forgive me." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. His expression was calm as he said, "Let's get down to business. Who wants to see me?" The captain of the Imperial Guards looked around and saw that there was no one following them within 1,000 feet. Then, he replied cautiously, "My master invites you to meet him. He has something important to tell you. Lead the way." Ji Tianqing vaguely guessed something and agreed. The captain of the Imperial Guards did not waste any more time. He quickly took out a monarch-level divine talisman and poured his divine power into it. Swoosh! The golden divine talisman ignited and burst out with dazzling white light, engulfing him and Ji Tianqing. The space distorted, and the 2 figures disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing and the captain of the Imperial Guards teleported hundreds of miles away and appeared in a manor in the northern part of the city. This manor occupied an area of 10,000 feet in radius. It was built beautifully and exceptionally luxuriously. There were rows upon rows of palaces and residences in the surroundings, but the environment was very quiet and peaceful, and the divine power was extremely abundant. It was easy to imagine that such a luxurious residence in the royal city would definitely be expensive. Most likely, only the major powers and nobles would be able to possess them. The captain of the Imperial Guards led Ji Tianqing through the garden and corridors to the rockery beside the lake. And friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. NBSB. He cast a spell to dispel the illusory formation and opened a secret door. Only then did he enter the dark tunnel. Following the winding passageway, the 2 of them arrived at the door of a secret room at the bottom of the lake. The captain of the Imperial Guards bowed towards the door and respectfully said, "Master, young Master Tianqing is here." From the pitch-black door of the secret room, a dignified male voice came, "Invite him in." The captain of the Imperial Guards responded and cast a spell to dispel the formation, opening the door of the secret room. Then, he stood guard at the door of the secret room and gestured for Ji Tianqing to enter. Ji Tianqing stepped through the stone door and entered the dark secret room. Bang! The heavy stone door closed. The secret room, with a radius of 100 feet, was very quiet. The floor and walls were engraved with divine formations, and the 5-colored divine power condensed into threads and clouds, illusory and blurred. Ji Tianqing looked around and saw a purple jade stone table and 2 white jade chairs in the middle of the secret room. A middle-aged man wearing a golden dragon robe and a golden crown was sitting on the white jade chair. In front of him was an exquisite teapot and 2 exquisite teacups. "Young Master Tianqing, please sit." The golden-robed man stood up and greeted, looking at Ji Tianqing with a smile. This person was well-built and had a dignified appearance. His brows were filled with righteousness, but he did not pretend to be dignified. He had a natural affinity. Ji Tianqing walked to the table and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Third Prince." Clearly, the golden-robed man was Ning Qinggong's brother-in-law, the third son of the current king, Duanmu Yannian. The third prince saw that Ji Tianqing was neither servile nor overbearing and was still unfathomable. He could not help but sigh. For half a year, this little prince has only heard of young master's various deeds and has already felt admiration. Now that I have seen young master in person, I am even more amazed. You are truly extraordinary. Third prince is too kind, Ji Tianqing said politely. The third prince extended his hand and said, "Come, sit down and drink some tea." He made a "please" gesture with his left hand and held the teapot in his right as he personally poured tea for Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing nodded and sat down, taking a sip of tea. "I have just arrived at the capital, and the third prince is meeting with me in secret. Could something big have happened?" The third prince nodded slightly, and the smile on his face disappeared. He said with a heavy expression, "Yes, something big has happened. After the divine blood ceremony, the king will appoint a crown prince." Chapter 2997. Ji Tianqing's temperament was relatively straightforward. After meeting with the third prince, he did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Unexpectedly, the third prince was even more straightforward than him and directly threw out a heavy bomb. Even though Ji Tianqing's state of mind was as steady as Mount Tai and his state of mind was as still as an ancient well, he could not help but frown. "This is too sudden." Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a dignified tone, "All these years, the 3 princes have been secretly competing for the throne. This is also known by the high-level forces and powerhouses. Everyone understands the monarch's attitude. He wants to observe for a few more years to see the talents and characters of the 3 princes before making a decision. But why did the monarch suddenly announce the result? Appointing the crown prince is equivalent to announcing the monarch's decision. As long as the monarch is alive and the kingdom of God is not in chaos, the crown prince will be the crown prince. After the monarch abdicates, the crown prince will automatically succeed the throne. There are no twists and turns or accidents to speak of." The third prince picked up the teacup and took a deep sip. He gently shook his head and said, "Logically speaking, Father is in his prime and the kingdom of God is very stable. There is no need for him to be so anxious, and there is no reason for him to make this decision." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and said slowly, "Unless the monarch is under some kind of threat or is under some kind of pressure." The third prince frowned and thought for a while, then shook his head and said, "This does not make sense." Ji Tianqing asked, "Then do you know who the monarch is going to appoint as the crown prince?" The third prince stared at him and said, "I have always heard that young master has excellent strategy and great foresight. Please make a guess." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Since the third prince said so, the answer is basically confirmed. First of all, the monarch's choice is definitely not you. Otherwise, you would not be so anxious. Instead, you should be thinking about how to stabilize the position of the crown prince and suppress the other two princes. The third prince nodded and looked at him with shining eyes, indicating for him to continue. Ji Tianqing raised two fingers and continued, "Second of all, the monarch's choice is not the second prince. Because the second prince has always advocated for the crown prince and is the most popular among the people. He has the most power and background. If he were to become the crown prince, it would be an expected outcome. But you've fought with him for many years, so you must have a lot of information on him. You have a good chance of winning." Hearing this, the third prince narrowed his eyes, a look of deep shock flashing through his eyes. The fact that Ji Tianqing was able to pick out the second prince had already surprised him. He did not expect Ji Tianqing to be able to guess the trump card in his hand and the way to deal with it. This made everyone have a whole new level of respect for him. Ji Tianqing withdrew his finger and said with a smile, "So, it goes without saying who will be the crown prince." Perhaps no one would have thought that the crown prince that the monarch was going to appoint would be the most low-key and inconspicuous little prince. It was precisely because he was the youngest that he acted the most low-key. He had never revealed his ambition, nor did he have a powerful background. Therefore, you and the second prince both ignored him and did not treat him as a competitor. On the contrary, all of you even tried to win him over and rope him in, wanting him to become your helper. But in the end, the two of you who had the most hope became the losers. He didn't seem to be a threat, but he was the biggest winner. So much so that when you heard the answer, you felt that it was both absurd and terrifying. Moreover, you only just realized that you did not understand him well enough. Even if you wanted to deal with him, you didn't know where to start. Ji Tianqing's tone was solemn as he spoke frankly with assurance. Hearing this, the third prince's blood boiled, his eyes flashing. When Ji Tianqing finished speaking, he actually stood up and couldn't help but applaud and praise. "Good. Well said. That's great." The third prince was excited, not concealing the excitement in his heart and his admiration for Ji Tianqing. "Young master is indeed a great talent. Your analysis is thorough, meticulous, and accurate." He was very clear that it had not even been a year since Ji Tianqing had appeared in Qingshan City. In such a short time, Ji Tianqing had risen step by step and finally arrived at the capital. The third prince knew that he was powerful and ruthless. The destruction of the Blood Sword sect was the best proof. But he did not expect that Ji Tianqing had never come into contact with princes, royalty, or power. Yet, he was able to point out the pros and cons in a single sentence, as well as the hidden key points. It was as if he had seen everything with his own eyes and understood everything. The third prince was extremely shocked and impressed by such terrifying analytical and reasoning abilities. He even suspected that this young Master Tianqing was really a young genius and not an old monster that had lived for tens of thousands of years. After a long while, the third prince gradually calmed down. He stared at Ji Tianqing, cupped his hands and solemnly said, "It is this humble prince's honor to be acquainted with such a great talent as young Master Tianqing. Now that the great calamity is imminent, although this humble prince has made all sorts of preparations and methods, I still do not feel confident. I hope that young master can lend a helping hand and help this humble prince reverse the situation and stabilize the situation." The third prince was so impressed by Ji Tianqing's intelligence that he solemnly asked for his help. If others were to see this scene, they would probably be dumbstruck. To have a respected prince treat a wise man with respect and sincerely ask for help was the lifelong dream of every strategist in the world. However, Ji Tianqing shook his head and refused. "Third prince is too serious. This lord is just a country bumpkin. How could I have the ability and methods to reverse the situation?" The third prince thought he was being modest, so he bowed again and said sincerely, "Young master's talent and learning are obvious to all the princes and great sections. This humble prince sincerely invites young master to assist me and is willing to make you the chief of staff. In the future, if the situation is reversed and this humble prince is able to inherit the throne, you will definitely be made prime minister. This is this humble prince's promise to you." The third prince's words were powerful and sonorous. If it were any other divine monarch, they definitely would not be able to resist this temptation, let alone refuse the third prince's sincerity. However, Ji Tianxing still shook his head and said with a chuckle, "Third prince misunderstands. This lord is just a passerby who yearns for unfettered freedom and will not be reluctant to part with the mortal world. As for your country's struggle for the throne, in the end, it has nothing to do with this lord. No matter who becomes the crown prince and who inherits the throne, it is the Duanmu family's business." Since Ji Tianxing had already made it so clear, the third prince naturally knew that his mind was set and that it would be very difficult to change it. However, the third prince was still very unwilling. He frowned and thought for a moment, then said sincerely, "Young Master Tianxing, this king has also heard Patriarch Ning say that you have a free and easy personality and yearn for freedom. Now that you have refused this king's invitation, it is within expectations. However, you must know that you and second royal brother have already formed a deep enmity that is very difficult to resolve. The Blood Sword sect is also the fifth prince's arm, but it was also destroyed by you. Second prince and fifth prince are like fire and water with you. If they succeed in ascending the throne, they will definitely use all of Divine Nation's power to deal with you. At that time, even if this king shares a common enemy with you and wants to help you resist the storm, I will not be able to do so." Chapter 2998. The third prince tried to persuade Ji Tianxing with emotion and reason. Not only did he play the emotional card, but he also explained the pros and cons and deduced the future situation. If it was anyone else, they would not reject him. However, Ji Tianxing had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. He was not afraid of how unreasonable, domineering, or cruel the opponent was. He could always fight back in an even more domineering manner. He was only afraid of sincere invitations, pleas, and crying complaints. This made it difficult for him to refuse. In the end, the third prince said everything he needed to say. He even said that he had a young, beautiful, and intelligent daughter. She was only 18 years old this year, and her name was Princess Yinling. Princess Silver Bell was the apple of their eye and the brightest pearl of the royal family. Ordinary young talents were definitely not worthy of their daughter. Only a peerless genius like Ji Tianxing was qualified to marry Princess Yinling. Ji Tianxing felt his scalp tingle. He was afraid that the third prince would be his father-in-law if he continued to speak. If that was the case, then when he saw Ning Xiyuan again, wouldn't he have to call her cousin? It was so awkward no matter how he thought about it. In the end, Ji Tianxing could not refuse the third prince's kindness. He could only interrupt and say, "Third prince, thank you for thinking so highly of me and trusting me. Unfortunately, I won't be staying in the Divine Kingdom for long, and I can't help you ascend to the throne. However, although I can't be your aid, we can be friends. We can help each other, fight the enemy together, and help you plan." Hearing this, the third prince felt much better. Although it was very regretful that Ji Tianxing could not be used by him and become a general under his command. He knew very well that a genius like Ji Tianxing might not be someone he could control. It was already a good result for them to be friends, watch out for each other, and help each other. Therefore, the third prince cupped his hands and bowed to Ji Tianxing, sincerely thanking him. Ji Tianxing hurriedly returned the bow. The two of them exchanged a few pleasantries before sitting down to chat. Without talking about government affairs or important matters, the atmosphere became much more relaxed. The third prince took the initiative to ask, "If this king is not wrong, young master, you came to the capital this time for the divine blood ceremony, right?" "That's right." Ji Tianxing did not hide it. The third prince smiled faintly and said, "With young master's strength, Winning the championship in the martial arts competition is already a foregone conclusion. However, the rules of the martial arts competition were complicated. They had to be selected layer by layer, and it would take a long time. This king will arrange for you to enter the top 20 and participate in the last few rounds of the competition. This will save you a lot of trouble. This was a classic example of under-the-table manipulation. However, the third prince did not have any psychological burden. After all, Ji Tianxing's strength was too strong. He would definitely sweep away all his opponent. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "Thank you." The third prince continued. This prince heard that after the blood sword sect was destroyed, fifth brother flew into a rage and smashed many things in the residence, even killing several attendants. Fifth brother had always been low-key and steady in his actions. He never showed his emotions on his face. In all these years, this is the first time I've seen him so angry. It's easy to imagine that before you even arrived at the capital, he was already plotting how to get rid of you. After a pause, he continued, "There's also second brother. Although you don't have any direct enmity with him, he's the Princess of Skywind. However, Princess Tianfeng was his most trusted subordinate. She was also the most important chess piece in his network of forces in the north. In the end, you killed Princess Skywind and did not receive any punishment from the king. The position of Princess Skywind fell into the hands of an old noble of the neutral faction. This is a great loss to second brother. With second brother's vengeful personality, he most likely won't let you off." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "This king knows. Apart from the two princes, there are also other forces that want to get rid of me. Right now, the capital is like the mouth of a giant beast, ready to swallow me at any time." Seeing that he was so clear about the situation, the third prince took the opportunity to persuade him. "Since young master also understands your situation, then this king will be frank. I hope that young master can stay in this king's mansion temporarily. You can rest in peace and avoid unnecessary trouble." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "No need. This will inevitably bring more danger and trouble to the third Marquis mansion." The third prince's eyes were somewhat dim. He thought to himself, "I'm afraid that's not the only reason. Most importantly, you don't want to get too close to this king, right?" Of course, he could only think about this in his heart. Everyone had a tacit understanding. If he said it out loud, it would be meaningless. But the third prince was still not satisfied. He continued, "Since young master feels that it's not convenient to stay in the third Marquis mansion, then why don't you stay here? This Longwind courtyard is one of my mansions. It has all the necessary facilities. Maids, guards, and servants are also fully equipped. Your safety and comfort are guaranteed. Moreover, this Longwind courtyard is not far from my mansion. It's only 50 miles, so it's convenient to travel." Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He thought of something and asked, "Right, is there any news about Miss Ning?" Calculating the time, she should have broken through to the Divine Lord realm and should be arriving at the capital soon, right? At the mention of Ning Xiyuan, the third prince immediately revealed a gratified smile. "Aya, this prince forgot about such an important matter. Before we meet, this king still wants to report the good news to young master." "That's right. As you expected, that girl Xiyuan successfully broke through to the Divine Lord realm 10 days ago. After recuperating at home for 7 days, she rushed to the capital. Calculating the time, she should be arriving tomorrow." The third prince stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a solemn tone, "Speaking of Xiyuan, before this king came to see you, the queen consort repeatedly urged me to thank you in person. Thank you for providing medicine and pill formulas to resolve the Ning family's bloodline, Heavenly Bane. From now on, the Ning family descendants will no longer be tortured by Heavenly Bane. Each of them will have a boundless future. Not only did you save the Ning family from calamity, but you also sent the Ning family from hell to heaven, giving the Ning family a chance to soar. To the Ning family, You are a great benefactor of immeasurable merit. The Ning family descendants will forever remember this in their hearts. The queen consort has often said that when you come to the capital, she will definitely hold a banquet to welcome you. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded, his tone indifferent as he said, "It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning." He wasn't bragging, but it really wasn't difficult for him. The third prince was even more shocked. He laughed heartily and said, "A genius is a genius, indeed different from the rest. The heavenly bane that has troubled the Ning family for thousands of years is just a small matter to you. This is the difference between us. To say something presumptuous, this king sometimes fantasizes that this king can be as extraordinary as young master. Even if I have to give up the throne and the identity of a prince, I am willing to do so." Ji Tianxing only smiled slightly and didn't comment. However, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind and said disdainfully, "This guy really knows how to dream. A mere prince and monarch in exchange for the soul of a divine king? Haha! Even the great Yan Empire's emperor isn't fit to carry our shoes." Chapter 2999. A person's manner of speech and bearing depended on their status and knowledge. A noble figure like the third prince was naturally at the top of the blood-fire divine kingdom. But in front of Ji Tianxing and the burial of heaven, he was still a frog at the bottom of the well. How could a divine lord who had never walked out of the great Yan Empire know the vastness of the Tianbei region, the vastness of the boundless heaven continent, and the vastness of the divine realm? Ji Tianxing definitely would not refute the third prince. That would be losing his bearing. The small talk was over. The third prince exhorted Ji Tianxing again before he took his leave. Of course, he left quietly. Ji Tianxing stayed in the Longwind court temporarily, and left the secret room to enter the main hall. He used his divine sense to observe the entire house. Being vigilant in times of peace was his habit. Not only did he have to understand the layout of the Longwind court and the distribution of people, but he also had to understand the strength of the array defense. In a short moment, he observed clearly. The Longwind court with a radius of 10,000 feet was enough to accommodate a large family of several thousand people. But there were only 400 people living here. Among them, 300 were guards, and more than 100 were servants and maids. 2 monarch-grade high-grade great arrays enveloped the entire house. The guards were divided into 3 teams, patrolling in shifts day and night. On the surface, the Longwind court's defensive power was not weak. It was difficult for ordinary people to sneak in. But Ji Tianxing was clear that this could not stop a high divine lord at all. He was about to personally take action and modify the 2 great arrays. At this time, a white-bearded old man in a purple robe and a square turban hat brought 4 experts into the main hall. Old man Lai Fu pays respect to young master. Subordinate pays respect to young master. The white-bearded old man took the lead to bow. The 4 young experts followed closely behind. Ji Tianxing raised his head and looked. Glancing at Lai Fu, he guessed his identity. 6th level Divine Lord Realm, a veteran middle Divine Lord. He should be the housekeeper of the Longwind court. As for the 4 young experts, there were 3 strong and tall young men and a tall and muscular red-haired woman. These 4 people's strengths were all around 3rd level Divine Lord Realm. They were the cream of the crop among low-rank Divine Lords. Ji Tianxing took his seat at the head of the table and said calmly, "Everyone, please dispense with the formalities. Lai Fu, please speak your mind." Lai Fu and the others thanked him before straightening their backs to speak. Reporting to young master, this old man is the housekeeper of Chongfeng Courtyard, responsible for guarding the courtyard and managing the internal affairs. The Lord had already instructed that the young master would stay here for a while. This old man will do his best to take care of all the internal affairs and will not disturb young master. If young master has any requests, just let me know. Ji Tianxing nodded in satisfaction. Okay, continue. Lai Fu then pointed at the 4 young experts and introduced. These 3 young Sir Gods are the captains of the 300 guards of the Eternal Wind courtyard. They take turns to guard the courtyard and protect your safety. You can choose a few people to serve by your side. This is Sir Immortal Zhenhong, the leader of the maids in the residence. He is very suitable to protect you." When Lai Fu spoke, his expression was respectful and his tone was normal. There was nothing wrong with it, but his last sentence was a little thought-provoking. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown and look at the red-haired woman. This woman was from the Angry Blood God clan. She was about 3 meters tall and had a pretty face. Her skin was a healthy wheat color and her limbs were long and slender. Especially her legs, which took up 60% of her body. It was very exaggerated. Her body was neither fat nor thin. She was in a fit, well-proportioned, and sturdy state. It could be imagined that her explosive power, endurance, and toughness far exceeded that of an ordinary Sir God. If she entered a state of battle, she could turn into a female Tyrannosaurus. For most men, a woman with this kind of appearance and temperament had a special charm and temperament. But Ji Tianxing didn't care if the woman was beautiful or not. He didn't have any bad thoughts. While he was sizing up Sir Immortal Zhenhong, Sir Immortal Zhenhong also looked at him without any hesitation and seriously sized him up. She didn't show a shy look like a normal woman and bury her head in her majestic chest. It could be imagined that her personality and behavior were not shy and gentle. Most likely, she was straightforward and fiery. Moreover, the 3 guard captains also stared at Ji Tianxing with a complicated look in their eyes. They were in awe but also vigilant and defensive. Ji Tianxing glanced at them and suddenly understood. "The 3 of you are pursuing Sir Immortal Zhenhong?" He raised his eyebrows and asked indifferently. It was just a casual question, but it pointed out the thoughts of the 3 guard captains and Sir Immortal Zhenhong. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Sir Immortal Zhenhong's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise and quickly lowered his head. The 3 captains were also embarrassed and quickly turned their heads to look elsewhere. Lai Fu was afraid that Ji Tianxing would be angry, so he quickly smoothed things over and explained with a smile. "Young master, please calm down. There is no such thing. It's just that the 4 of them came to the Long Wind Court and worked together for hundreds of years. They have a deep relationship and are like siblings. It's natural for them to care and take care of each other. But no matter what, you are His Majesty's guest and they are His Majesty's servants. As long as it's your order, we will unconditionally obey and will not go against your will. Moreover, this old man can guarantee with his life that Sir Immortal Zhenhong is pure and has never had intimate interactions with any man. Even your history of romance is blank." Lai Fu's words were a bit explicit. Not only did he imply that Ji Tianxing could do whatever he wanted, but he also guaranteed that Sir Immortal Zhenhong was original. The 3 guard captains immediately lowered their heads even more, hiding deep helplessness and pain in their eyes. Sir Immortal Zhenhong's expression still did not change, but his eyes were cold and indifferent, without any emotional fluctuations. It was as if she was just a puppet. It was a posture of resignation. She suppressed all her will and absolutely obeyed orders. Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and slapped Lai Fu's face from a distance. Slap! The crisp sound of the slap rang out. Lai Fu covered his cheek and fell to the ground, but he did not dare to get up. He hurriedly knelt down and apologized. Ji Tianxing coldly shouted, "You old dog, you are so good at currying favor and taking advantage of others. What kind of person do you think I am? What do you want to do? Pimp? Or is this a honey trap that the 3rd prince asked you to carry out?" His voice was not loud nor was it angry, but it contained a soul-stirring majesty, fiercely intimidating Lai Fu and the 4 Sir Immortals. The entire hall was shrouded in an invisible aura. Lai Fu knelt on the ground, trembling, kowtowing and begging for mercy. The 3 guard captains and Sir Immortal Zhenhong also lowered their heads in fear, not daring to breathe. However, Ji Tianqing's reaction and attitude made the three guard captains secretly relieved, lowering their vigilance. Sir Immortal Zhen Hong was the same. His cold and indifferent eyes eased a lot. Seeing Lai Fu's frightened and pitiful appearance, she couldn't bear it. She hurriedly bowed and said to Ji Tianqing, "Please calm down, young Master Tianqing. Uncle Lai Fu did not dare to offend you, nor did he mean to blaspheme you. It was Sir Immortal Zhen Hong who failed to fulfill his duty as a guard captain. Sir Immortal Zhen Hong is willing to accompany young Master and ask for forgiveness with practical actions." Chapter 3000. Sir Zhen Hong's reaction was within everyone's expectations. The three guard captains and Lai Fu all knew her nature. She was cold and resolute on the outside and obeyed all orders. She had never been weak or delicate. No matter how difficult it was, she would never say a word. But in fact, her personality was simple, straightforward, and kind. Lai Fu took good care of them and treated them like his own nephew. The four of them were also very respectful to Lai Fu and always called him uncle. Sir Zhen Hong didn't want Lai Fu to be punished, so he offered to serve Ji Tianqing. Using practical actions to atone for his sins was a very obvious hint. She had already mustered up a lot of courage to say these words, because she knew that sooner or later, she would be offered to a big shot and used as a bargaining chip. This was the destined ending. It was also the greatest role she could play in repaying the third prince. After all, she had almost lost her life back then, and the third prince had saved her. The moment she was saved, she made a vow to the third prince. She would have to pay it back sooner or later. Rather than wait for the future and be offered to an unknown big shot. Perhaps he was old and ugly, perhaps he was despicable and sinister, perhaps he had strange habits that made people want to vomit. She would be more willing to offer herself to this young master in front of her. After all, although this young master was of a foreign race, he was extremely handsome and divine. Especially the unfathomable and invisible divine power on him that was even more awe-inspiring and worshipping. That special temperament could disregard any race and create a fatal attraction. Therefore, Sir Zhen Hong thought to himself, if she could offer herself to this young Master Tianqing, she wouldn't feel wronged and could also repay the third prince for saving her life. It was the best of both worlds. However, Sir God Zhen Hong's words caused the atmosphere in the hall to become even weirder. Lai Fu and the three guard captains had complicated looks in their eyes as they muttered in their hearts. Zhen Hong, I have already angered young Master Tianqing. He obviously doesn't like women. Why do you still want to anger him? For a noble big shot like him, this is humiliating him. Zhen Hong, you've changed. Are you tempted by this young master because he is very powerful and very valiant? Ah, my heart hurts. My innocent Zhen Hong actually fell in love with him at first sight? Zhen Hong, you are too kind. You are indeed the goddess of my dreams. Don't worry, even if this young master cheated on your feelings, he will abandon you after a few days. You are still pure in my heart. I will still love you and accept you. Lai Fu and the three bodyguard captains each had their own thoughts. Some were worried and anxious, some were heartbroken, and some were helpless and desperate. Of course, there was also an infatuated person who was waiting to take over. However, Ji Tianqing stared at Sir God Zhen Hong expressionlessly, exerting great pressure on him. Do you really want to follow me? Engulfed by his divine might, Sir God Zhen Hong was under great pressure. His body trembled slightly and his divine soul trembled. However, his willpower was very strong. He struggled to look straight at Ji Tianqing and replied with clear eyes, yes. Ji Tianqing was slightly surprised and a little surprised. He secretly used the divine eye secret technique and his eyes turned golden. He stared at Zhen Hong and carefully observed him. After a while, he suddenly understood and thought to himself, I see. No wonder he is so special and has such distinctive characteristics. He probably doesn't even know this secret himself, right? Ji Tianqing originally wanted to refuse, but he suddenly changed his mind. Good. I will give you this opportunity. As his voice fell, he withdrew his invisible divine might. Sir God Zhenhong's pressure suddenly disappeared. He immediately let out a long breath, as if relieved of a heavy burden. Lai Fu and the 3 bodyguard captains were stunned, and their expressions were a little strange. Of course, the 4 of them muttered in their hearts. Young Master Tianqing just acted like he didn't get close to women and spoke righteously. Why did he accept Zhenhong's service in the blink of an eye? Could it be that he didn't notice Zhenhong's special temperament before and was attracted to him again just now? Zhenhong, this boy is too hypocritical. You were fooled. First he pretended to be upright and virtuous, then he revealed his powerful strength, and finally he got you. This was the most common technique used by noble young masters to pick up girls. Zhenhong, you are too naive. I am very disappointed in you. Although the result made me very sad, my infatuation will not change. After you are hurt and abandoned by him, I will accompany and comfort you for the rest of my life. Unlike the 4 men, Sir God Zhenhong didn't have so many thoughts in his mind. After she calmed down, she hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you for your kindness, young master." Ji Tianqing didn't say anything more. He waved his hand and said, "Today's matter is over. You all can leave. Zhenhong, go tidy up my bedroom. I want to rest." Lai Fu and the 3 bodyguard captains were about to bow and say goodbye. When they suddenly heard this sentence, their expressions changed and their hearts thumped. It can't be right? It's only noon, and he asked Zhenhong to serve him in bed? Tidy up the bedroom and rest in the daytime? This boy is really impatient. The ancients didn't deceive me. The more serious a person looks on the surface, the more dirty and unrestrained his heart is. The 3 bodyguard captains' hearts seemed to have been trampled by 10,000 alpacas. Lai Fu also had a complicated mood. He hurriedly left the hall. Sir God Zhenhong said yes, and went to tidy up the bedroom with a restless mood. Only Ji Tianqing was left in the hall. Silence was restored. Whoosh! A white light flashed. White Dragon, who couldn't bear the loneliness of cultivation, appeared beside Ji Tianqing. He looked outside the hall and saw the backs of the 3 bodyguard captains leaving, revealing a playful smile. "Master, I dare to bet that those 2 guard captains definitely regard you as a mortal enemy. In their minds, you are about to put a hat on them, and grasslands will grow on their heads." Ji Tianqing looked indifferent, frowned and asked, "Why are there 2 and not 3? White Dragon laughed even more mockingly and said in a playful tone, "That's because the 3rd bodyguard captain is a bootlicker. He would rather take over and continue to bootlicker." Speaking of this, he shook his head sympathetically and sighed, "Unfortunately, that boy hasn't heard a word. A bootlicker has nothing." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said with a dignified expression, "You don't cultivate all day, why do you talk so much nonsense? You can't bear the loneliness and don't want to cultivate?" White Dragon smiled and said, "Sure enough, I can't hide from Master's discerning eyes. Recently, I've been stuck in the 9th level of the Heavenly God realm and have encountered a bottleneck. Moreover, the 2 Masters' wives are also stuck in the half-step Divine Lord realm. And Junior Sister has also been stuck in the 8th level for a long time. I think that everyone has been cultivating in seclusion for too long, so it's appropriate to relax and strike a balance between work and rest." Ji Tianqing turned to look at him and asked, "You mean everyone should stop cultivating and stay in Changfeng Courtyard to rest for a while?" White Dragon quickly nodded and said, "Yes. Before, you were always on the move and the situation was very dangerous, so no one mentioned this matter. Now that we are in the capital, it is more prosperous, and you are safe, so it's time for everyone to relax." Chapter 3001. It wasn't that Ji Tianqing hadn't thought about it before, but he already had an answer, and it was no. However, White Dragon had brought it up. Of course, he couldn't ignore it. he still had to ask for everyone's opinion. Moreover, he had always been a loner. This caused some unnecessary misunderstandings between the Ning family, the third prince, Lai Fu, and Zhen Hong. He thought that if Yun Yao and Ji Ku were by his side, they should be able to avoid those misunderstandings. After all, any woman would feel ashamed when she saw Yun Yao and Ji Ku, right? Okay, I'll go to the space-time distortion to see them and ask for their opinions. Ji Tianxing made up his mind. He left the hall with White Dragon and went to the residence. When he and White Dragon arrived at the residence, Sir God Zhenhong had already tidied up the bedroom. The spacious and warm bedroom was not only spotless, but also filled with the elegant fragrance of flowers. The guards and maids outside the door had already been dismissed by Sir God Zhenhong. She was the only one left in the room, waiting anxiously. When Ji Tianxing and White Dragon stepped into the bedroom, they saw that she had already changed into a soft silk dress. Her red hair was loose and hung down to her waist. At this moment, she was not as valiant as before. Instead, she had a charming temperament. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands supporting her chin. She stared at her feet with a complicated look in her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Ji Tianxing suddenly felt awkward and had to stop. White Dragon was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed a naughty smile and transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing. "Master, I suddenly need to pee. I'll take my leave now. I won't disturb you any more." With that, he turned around and was about to leave. Ji Tianxing glared at him angrily. Although he didn't say anything, White Dragon understood what he meant. At this moment, Sir God Zhenhong heard the footsteps and came back to her senses. She turned her head and saw Ji Tianxing and White Dragon standing at the door. They were looking at her with strange expressions. She was also stunned on the spot. She looked at Ji Tianxing and White Dragon with a complicated expression. What is young Master Tianxing trying to do? Why did she bring a stranger here? Don't tell me, he and that white-haired man want me to serve them? He's clearly an elegant young master, how can he be so disgusting? This thought flashed through Zhenhong's mind. His body suddenly trembled, and his heart was filled with fear. She subconsciously stood up and clutched her dress tightly with both hands. With a nervous expression, she said, "Young Master Tianxing, this servant suddenly feels unwell. I'm afraid I can't serve you. I'll take my leave now." As she spoke, she took a step forward in a panic and was about to escape. "Stop!" However, Ji Tianxing shouted coldly with an expressionless face and stopped her. Zhenhong's body trembled. He could only stop and look down at the ground. The panic in her heart intensified, and she did not dare to raise her head to look at Ji Tianxing's expression. As soon as she thought of the terrifying scene that might occur, she felt endless regret. Unexpectedly, what she expected did not happen. Ji Tianxing and Bai Long stood at the door. They did not mean to take advantage of her. Moreover, Ji Tianxing looked dignified and ordered, "Put on your clothes. This monarch has something to say to you." Zhenhong was relieved. She breathed a sigh of relief and quickly put on her dress and shoes. When she returned to her previous dress, her heart was at ease. She respectfully saluted and said, "Please instruct me, young master." Ji Tianxing stared at her majestically and said in a solemn tone, "This monarch doesn't care if you're shouldering a task or being instigated by others. In short, you've all misunderstood. This monarch is clean and has a family. I hope you respect yourself. This is the only time this happened. This monarch can pretend that nothing happened. If you flatter and offer yourself to this monarch again, don't blame this monarch for punishing you severely." Zhenhong was stunned on the spot. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she looked at Ji Tianxing in astonishment. She never thought that things would turn out like this. It turned out that young Master Tianxing did not have any evil thoughts from beginning to end. He was indeed a clean and honest gentleman. It was just that she, Lai Fu, and the others had dirty thoughts. That was why they repeatedly offended young Master Tianxing. Understanding this, Zhen Hong remembered her half-covered appearance just now. She suddenly blushed with shame and wished she could find a hole to hide in. Too shameful! Too shameful! Zhen Hong could not stay a moment longer. Her cheeks and neck were red and hot. Her mind was in a mess. She dizzily bowed and hurriedly excused herself. Then, she ran out of the room like she was escaping. It was not until she was far away from the palace and returned to her residence that she gradually calmed down. Recalling Ji Tianxing's cold and dignified eyes at that time, she vomited blood with shame and indignation. Zhen Hong, how could you be so stupid and impatient? It's over. Your reputation is over. Young Master Tianxing will definitely think that you're only pretending to be noble and pure. In fact, your behavior is improper and your heart is wanton. Even if young Master Tianxing doesn't punish you, how can you face others in the future? Thinking of this, Zhen Hong wanted to cry but had no tears. She even wanted to die. In Ji Tianxing's bedroom, Bai Long could not help but want to laugh out loud. However, he saw that his master was expressionless and cold, so he could only force himself to hold it in. In the end, it was too hard for him to hold it in. He could only keep a straight face, but his shoulders kept shaking. Ji Tianxing sat at the table. He picked up the teapot and brewed a cup of tea. He drank it slowly. Laugh if you want to. It's so hard to hold it in. He took a sip of tea and said indifferently, "Pft, ha ha ha." Bai Long could not hold it in anymore. He laughed exaggeratedly. Master, Miss Zhen Hong is too innocent. You didn't see her expression just now. She was completely stunned. At first, she must have thought of something very evil. She was so scared that her face turned pale. Later, when she realized that she had misunderstood, she was so embarrassed that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. Her whole body turned red like a cooked prawn. How can there be such a straightforward girl? How can you bear to tease her like this? Why don't you take the opportunity to take her in and fulfill her little wish? Anyway, this disciple will help you keep it a secret. I will never let the two of you know. Ji Tianxing put down the teacup and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He sneered and said, "Is it fun to see her embarrassed? Is it fun to laugh? Ha ha! Extreme joy begets sorrow. Just don't cry in a few days." Bai Long's smile froze for a second. He only felt a chill on his back. He hurriedly asked, "Master, what do you mean?" "Ha ha!" Ji Tianxing looked at him and smiled meaningfully. Bai Long was even more panicked. His heart was beating a little faster. He begged pitifully, "Master, what are you doing? You won't kill your cutest disciple for Miss Zhen Hong, right?" Ji Tianxing smiled but did not answer. Bai Long's heart was in turmoil. He became more and more panicked. He said with a sad face, "Master, this disciple was wrong. This disciple shouldn't be gloating. Please be magnanimous." Chapter 3002. All right, don't talk nonsense, I won't take your life. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted Bai Long's pleading. "Stay here, I'll go take a look at them." After that, he handed the God Pagoda over to Bai Long for safekeeping. Then, he entered the 6th level of the God Pagoda. After flying for a while in the distorted space, he found Yun Yao and Ji Ku. Both of them weren't in closed-door cultivation and were sitting together drinking tea and chatting, exchanging their insights on cultivation. Even though their strength had improved very quickly, it was still not enough. Not long ago, both of them had reached the half-step Divine Monarch realm. But both of them had encountered a bottleneck and were unable to break through to the Divine Monarch realm. So they had no choice but to end their cultivation and gather together to exchange and discuss. Wu Shuang also stopped cultivating and sat beside Yun Yao. She still looked like she was 6 or 7 years old, delicate and adorable. She drank the God Du tea obediently and listened attentively to the conversation between Yun Yao and Ji Ku. Her eyes revealed a pondering expression. Apparently she had gained a lot. Ji Tianxing's sudden arrival surprised Yun Yao, Ji Ku and Wu Shuang. Both of them stopped their conversation and looked towards him with a smile on their faces. Tianxing, why are you here? Brother Tianxing, are you done with your matters? Tianxing smiled and nodded, looking at them with a gentle gaze. We haven't seen each other for a long time, both of your strengths have increased greatly. At this moment, Ji Wushuang stretched out her arms and ran towards Ji Tianxing in surprise, shouting, Father, you haven't come to visit us for a long time, Shuang misses you. A crisp voice, a smile from the bottom of her heart, and a childish voice. Ji Tianxing's heart was touched and he was filled with guilt. He quickly opened his arms and hugged Ji Wushuang. Shuang Father hasn't come to visit you these few days. Have you been cultivating diligently? Ji Wushuang hugged his neck and replied without hesitation, Of course, I've broken through to the 8th stage realm. However, I've recently encountered a bottleneck and am temporarily unable to break through to the 9th level. At this point, Ji Wushuang curled his lips and revealed an ashamed and self-blaming expression. Ji Tianxing rubbed her head and said dotingly, Shuang is the smartest. Don't blame yourself or feel dejected. Wasn't it just a small bottleneck? Tell me, what difficulties have you encountered? Ji Wushuang shook his head and said, Father, you and Mother haven't seen each other for a long time. You definitely have a lot to talk about. You guys can chat first. We'll talk about my cultivation bottleneck later. Ji Tianxing pinched her little cheeks and said in a gratified tone, Shuang has really grown up. You've also become sensible. Your thoughts are actually so meticulous. All right, I'll help you settle it later. After he finished speaking, he looked at Yun Yao and Ji Ku and asked, I heard that the two of you have both reached the half-step Divine Lord realm but have encountered a bottleneck and are temporarily unable to break through. I'm currently in the capital of Blood Flame Divine Country. I'll be staying here for a while. The capital is prosperous and affluent. Moreover, the Divine Blood ceremony will be held in 2 days. It will definitely be very lively. After you guys came to the Divine World, you guys have been cultivating in seclusion in the Divine Pagoda and have never relaxed. Why don't you take this opportunity to stay in the Longwind courtyard for a few days and rest and relax? Hearing him say so, Yun Yao and Ji Ku looked at each other and revealed puzzled expressions. However, the two of them understood the reason when they saw each other's reaction. Yun Yao revealed a faint smile and shook her head gently. Tianxing, although we've encountered a cultivation bottleneck, Ku and I are discussing how to solve it. The two of us have never thought of leaving the Divine Pagoda to rest and relax outside. Because we know that you don't have a fixed residence now and have enemies on all sides. We haven't reached the Divine Lord realm yet. We can't help you or protect ourselves. It's very likely that we'll drag you down. Therefore, it's better for us to wait until we break through to the Divine Lord realm before leaving the Divine Pagoda. It's more suitable for us to stay by your side. Ji Ku also nodded in agreement and said, Big Brother Tianxing, you must have something important to do in the capital of Blood Flame Divine Country. There must be experts gathered here and danger lurks everywhere. At such a crucial time, we won't cause trouble for you. Moreover, Big Senior Sister and I have never thought of leaving the Divine Pagoda to rest and relax. Who told you all this? It must be that fellow Little White again, right? This fellow has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. Ji Ku pretended to be angry and frowned, scolding White Dragon. In the bedroom, White Dragon, who was holding the Divine Pagoda and waiting quietly, sneezed inexplicably and felt a chill on his back. Although he didn't know what Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao talked about, he had a premonition. However, he had a bad premonition that he was going to be scolded again. Ji Tianxing helped White Dragon to smooth things over. He smiled and shook his head, saying, It has nothing to do with White Dragon. I'm just worried that you'll feel depressed and bored after being in seclusion for a long time. However, Ji Ku didn't believe him. She chuckled and said, Big Brother Tianxing, don't make excuses for Little White. It must be that he can't stand the loneliness and wants to go out to play. That's why he's using us as an excuse. Ji Tianxing didn't comment and quickly changed the topic. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Since you don't want to leave the Divine Pagoda, I'll help you solve your cultivation bottlenecks first. Come, tell me about the problems you've encountered. Yun Yao and Ji Ku nodded at the same time and said in unison, You go first. Seeing that the two of them had such tacit understanding, Ji Tianxing smiled and said, Ku, you go first. Thus, Ji Ku recounted the difficulties she had encountered in her cultivation in detail. Although she had also become a peak Divine Lord 1,000 years ago. Logically speaking, with her cultivation experience, she shouldn't have encountered any problems at the peak Divine Lord realm. However, in this life, she had inherited the legacy of the Divine Beast Phoenix and cultivated the 5-colored Divine Fire and dozens of Demon Tao Divine powers. This was something she had never come into contact with in her previous life. With the memories and experience of a peak Divine Lord, it was natural for her to encounter a bottleneck when cultivating the peak Divine King's divine powers. Fortunately, after she told him all the problems, Ji Tianxing only used 15 minutes to find the corresponding solution in his memory. For problems that could be solved according to the symptoms, he directly said the solution. For problems that couldn't be solved directly, he could also beat around the bush, hint, and enlighten Ji Ku. In this way, Ji Ku saw the clear sky through the clouds and immediately came to a realization. The problems that were difficult to solve previously were immediately solved. The hazy and vague concepts in the past also suddenly became clear. Ji Ku's problem was solved and she became full of confidence. She was confident that she could break through the bottleneck and reach the first level of the Divine Lord realm within 10 days. Ji Ku's problem was solved. It was Yun Yao's turn to talk about the problems she had encountered, as well as the obscure and uncertain perplexities. Originally, she had fused with the 6 divine pearls and awakened most of Goddess Yaoguang's memories. However, what she was currently cultivating was Goddess Yaoguang's divine Tao inheritance, which were all top-notch divine powers and consummate skills. However, there were still some missing memories in her divine soul, and the most important memories had not been awakened. This caused her to occasionally encounter difficulties when comprehending the divine Tao and cultivating king-level divine powers and secret technique. Chapter 3003. Ji Tianxing listened to Yun Yao's question seriously. It took him 4 hours to come up with a solution. Of course, he had a way to solve most of the problems. He didn't have a targeted and definite solution to some of the problems. However, he could draw inferences and give the most suitable suggestion. As long as Yun Yao tried a few more times, she would definitely be able to solve all the problems. Just like that, Yun Yao's cultivation problem was solved. She was also full of confidence and anticipation that she would be able to break through to the Divine Lord realm in a few days. Ji Tianxing solved their cultivation bottleneck. Finally, he looked at Ji Wushuang, who was in his arms, and was about to ask her what problem she had encountered. Unexpectedly, Wushuang was lying on his shoulder, quietly in a daze. Her delicate little face revealed a thoughtful expression, as if she was thinking about something. There was also a hint of melancholy in her big, clear eyes. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and the others immediately saw the problem. Shuang-er, what are you thinking about? Oh right, Shuang-er didn't say anything for such a long time just now. She was very quiet. I can see that Shuang-er has something on her mind. Ji Wushuang came back to her senses and quickly shook her head when she saw the 3 pairs of concerned eyes. I'm fine. Don't worry and don't guess blindly. She pouted and revealed an innocent smile. However, she was still young and too innocent. How could she hide it from Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku? Ji Tianxing looked at her lovingly and scratched her little nose with his finger. He asked, Shuang-er, what were you thinking about just now? Tell Dad and Mom? Do I really have to tell them? Wushuang looked up at Ji Tianxing. She still wanted to keep her little secret and didn't want to reveal it. However, Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, And the other two said firmly, "Of course. If there's anything that makes you unhappy, you must tell us. Shuang be good. Tell us." Ji Wushuang hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Father, I want to see what the God realm is like." Her voice was very soft and lacking in confidence. After she finished speaking, she lowered her head, not daring to look at her parents' reaction. She expressed her wish carefully, but she was worried that it would cause trouble for her parents or that she would be rejected. Back then, she was born in the 5 elements world of the lower planes. However, ever since she was born, she spent 95% of her time cultivating in the divine pagoda. The only people by her side were her mother, Jiku, Qianyu, and Black Dragon. Only Ji Tianxing had left the divine tower to participate in the battle before he conquered the major galaxies and destroyed the heaven-punishing race. After everyone ascended to the God realm, she never left the God pagoda. What exactly was the legendary eternal God realm like? She didn't know that she didn't even have a vague shadow in her heart. She couldn't even begin to fantasize. Even though she knew that her parents did not allow her to leave the pagoda in order to protect her. Letting her cultivate in the distorted space-time was also to let her grow faster. However, she was only a young girl after all. Her temperament was very pure and simple. She also longed to leave this cold and dark space and see the outside world. Blue sky, white clouds, green water, green mountains, and hundreds of flowers, these things that couldn't be more ordinary were very distant to her. However, she was too obedient and sensible. She had always hidden her true thoughts in the bottom of her heart and did not express them. Now, for the first time, she expressed her wish to her parent. It was inevitable that she would feel uneasy. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku immediately quieted down. The 3 of them looked at each other. Their expressions became complicated. Their eyes were filled with self-blame and guilt. This was because they had guessed Wushuang's thoughts. They also understood their own negligence. The atmosphere was a little heavy. Wushuang pursed her lips and hugged Ji Tianxing's neck. She comforted him softly, "Father, I'm sorry. I'm not sensible. Don't be troubled. I was just saying. You don't have to take it seriously." His daughter was so smart, obedient, and sensible. Ji Tianxing felt even more guilty and distressed. He stretched out his hands and cupped Wushuang's cheek. He said in a serious tone, "Wushuang, it's us who have let you down. We neglected your feelings. Although you are the apple of our eye and the smartest and most adorable child in the world, we owe you. But we owe you. We couldn't let you have a normal childhood like other children. I promise you that I will take you out of the God pagoda and see what the God realm is like." Ji Tianxing made a solemn promise. A faint smile appeared on Wushuang's little face. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. She was about to speak when Yun Yao quickly shook her head and refused. She persuaded, "Wushuang, it's true that we owe you. However, we still have many opportunities to make up for it in the future. However, right now, your father is in a dangerous situation. He can't accompany you for the time being." Jiku also held Wushuang's little hand and persuaded, "Wushuang, please be considerate of your father one more time. After this matter is over, let him make it up to you, okay?" The smile on Wushuang's little face gradually faded. A trace of disappointment flashed through her big, clear eyes. However, she nodded obediently and said, "Okay." Ji Tianxing's heart ached when he saw this. He couldn't bear it and said in a firm tone, "Yao Yao, Cuckoo, stay in the God pagoda and cultivate. Break through to the God monarch realm. I will bring Wushuang to the Longwind courtyard for a few days and play in the King City for a few days. No matter what, even if the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom changes its monarch, it's not as important as me accompanying my daughter. No matter what danger there is, I will protect Wushuang well. It's decided." Since he had already made up his mind, Yun Yao and Ji Ku wouldn't object anymore. Ji Wushuang raised her head and looked at her father. Her thin lips were tightly pursed and her big clear eyes were covered with a layer of mist. Ever since she was born, she had spent very little time with her father. In her impression and cognition, her father had always been cold and dignified. Only today did she know that her mother didn't lie to her. Her father was indeed the most domineering expert who loved her the most. Having a father who doted on her so much and was so powerful and domineering was her greatest pride. However, the only regret was that her brother wasn't by everyone's side. If her parents could go to the Dragon Realm as soon as possible and rescue her brother, how great would it be if the family could be reunited? Wushuang prayed silently in her heart. Ji Tianxing reminded Yun Yao and Ji Ku before leaving the God Pagoda with Wushuang. Yun Yao and Ji Ku collected their thoughts and hurriedly went into seclusion to cultivate. Both of them secretly made up their minds to break through to the God Monarch realm as soon as possible. At that time, they would be able to accompany Ji Tianxing and help him take care of Wushuang. That way, Ji Tianxing could also concentrate on handling matters and dealing with crises. Swoosh! A white light flashed and Ji Tianxing brought Wushuang back to the room.